Good morning, everyone. I'd like to encourage you to come up front because if there are not a lot of people, well, that way we can make it more inclusive and involve you all in the conversation. And the OECD has brought some documents up here that you may like to have a copy of. Good morning, everyone. I think we're ready to begin. We don't want to take up your time, so I know everybody's busy and has other engagements. Good morning, everyone. My name is Barbara Warner. I am with the U.S. Council for International Business, which served as one of the co-organizers for Workshop 104, Integrated Policy Framework, Key to Realizing Digital Inclusion. Another of our co-organizers was the Internet Society. Jane Coffin, one of our speakers, is with the Internet Society and the Government of Colombia. In this workshop, we will focus on sharing practical insights on the value of an integrated policy framework for digital transformation in fostering economic prosperity across all sectors and improving societal well-being inclusively. This workshop will use the OECD's Going Digital Integrated Policy Framework. There was a main session yesterday, or rather it was in the main meeting room, that focused on different tools for realizing digital transformation, and the OECD made a presentation about the Going Digital project. This will look at the integrated policy framework that was an outcome of that project. It will consider it as a reference and explore the value and barriers that may arise in implementing the integrated framework and how its related Going Digital toolkit may help to overcome some of these challenges. First, I'd like to acknowledge Lauren Crean from TMG Legal, who will serve as the all-important substantive rapporteur for this session, producing the written report for all of posterity. I'd also like to acknowledge Bruno Martins dos Santos, who has provided a lot of behind-the-scenes work. Bruno's down there. And now I'd like each of the speakers to introduce themselves and very briefly explain what they do to provide some context for their remarks. So let's begin with Ben.
Good morning. My name is Ben Wallace. I work for Microsoft. I'm a regulatory policy analyst there. I'm based in Seattle. And I work across internet government policy issues. And I spend a lot of time with the IGF. I'm a member of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jane Coffin. I work at the intersection of policy, technology, and development. The teams I work with every day are out building internet infrastructure, working with governments to shape policy, and trying to include different open standards in the work that we do from the technical side.
Good morning. My name is Alex Cook. I'm the Councillor for Industry, Innovation and Science for the Australian Government. I'm based in Brussels but have European coverage, and I'm Australia's delegate on the OECD's Committee for Digital Economy Policy, which has been leading the work on the Going Digital project.
Good morning. I'm David Girten. I work at the OECD in the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation on digital economy policy for the just mentioned committee. I'm going to talk about my work in quite a bit of detail in a minute.
Great. Okay, let's move right to David. In undertaking the Going Digital project, the OECD endeavored to develop a policy framework that would guide policymakers, but also provide practical advice concerning a country's status, if you will, in the process of digital transformation, and some practical tools to help them overcome some of the barriers and challenges. So why don't you walk us through the Going Digital Toolkit so it's not so mysterious and we all understand how it can be accessed. You know, if you have access to the internet, you can access this toolkit. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Barbara. So before I actually come to the toolkit, I think it might make sense to give you a little bit of background on the Going Digital project that we've carried out and we are still carrying out at the OECD, which brings together just about every policy community at the OECD, and which was set up to help policymakers better understand digital transformation and develop policies that are fit for the digital age. The project started in 2017. We had a conference at the end of the first phase of the project in March 2019, and we're now in the second phase of the project. I want to just mention two key outputs from the first phase, and for that I'd ask the technicians to just switch to my screen if that's possible. The first is this publication, which summarizes over 130 outputs from this first phase of the project and has a lot of policy analysis and insights on key policy issues and policy recommendations, structured on the basis of the integrated policy framework that we'll talk about a lot today. And a second publication that is focused on measurement, structured also on the framework, which provides the state of the art of measuring digital transformation and provides a roadmap on how to improve that measurement. The third key output from the project is the Going Digital Toolkit, which we have launched as well in March this year in its first version. And I'm just making this a little bigger, so I hope you see it better. Up, this should be better. And as you can see there, what you see is basically the integrated policy framework. It is also built on that framework. And before coming to this actual toolkit and showing you a little bit of what you can do with it, or what governments and policymakers can do with it, I'll talk you through this framework. So we developed this framework because we saw that many governments in our member countries and partner countries are addressing digital transformation, but they do it in a fairly ad hoc manner, often still in many corners of government, and not necessarily in a coherent and coordinated manner. So the rationale for developing this framework was helping governments to improve coherence and coordination across all the policy areas that are affected by and are affecting digital transformation. The framework basically consists of these 7 policy dimensions that you see here on the screen in the 7 colors. And each of this dimension groups a number of specific policy areas that should be looked at jointly and are in need of coordination. So I'll walk you through each of those dimensions and give you a bit of an idea of the actual policy areas that are in each of the dimensions. The first one, access, is about high-quality access to communication networks and services, as well as access to data, which is becoming increasingly the foundation of the digital economy. And to enhance access, some of the key policies that should be considered are communication infrastructures and services policies and regulation, obviously, for example, to put the technical enablers in place, competition policy that are crucial to lower prices and improve quality of communication services, investment policy, in particular for investment in infrastructure, so infrastructure keeps up with the growing demand for data throughput, but also regional development policies, for example, that are very important to make sure that connectivity doesn't stop at the city border and sort of rural-urban divides can be addressed and reduced. The second dimension is about the effective use of digital technologies by all key actors involved in digital society and economy, so individuals, firms, and governments in particular. And to make sure effective use happens, key policies include digital government policies, where we see one crucial aspect to go beyond e-government, which is sort of digitalizing existing services, to adopting a more holistic approach and a user-driven approach. Investment policies that enable firms to invest not only in ICTs, but also in intangible assets that are crucial to making effective use of technologies. SMEs policies, we see SMEs as a weak point really in the economy in terms of taking up digital technologies, and policies can play a very important role in helping SMEs to catch up and thrive in digital markets. Business dynamism is key too. Structural policies can actually affect the diffusion of digital technologies very significantly. Another area is skills policies. That are the core to help everyone have the mix of skills that is needed to succeed both in life and at work. And digital security and privacy, we see mistrust still as a real important barrier for all sorts of actors, individuals, organizations, to adopt digital technologies and make proper use of them. Coming to innovation, which is really fundamentally underpinning the digital transformation itself. And to foster innovation in the digital age, key policies that should be considered include entrepreneurship policies. For example, regulatory burdens are often still hindering startups to innovate and experiment in digital environments. Again, SMEs policies, for example, public policies can play an important role in helping SMEs invest in R&D. I mentioned intangible assets earlier already. Science and technology policies to foster knowledge diffusion, open innovation, and open science. Again, digital government policies, but here with the view on open government data that can play an important role in fostering innovation, and obviously a whole range of sectoral policies and regulations that can very directly affect if and how new business models can thrive and scale. And business can experiment, and just to highlight here one key approach, regulatory sandboxes that can play an important role in making that happen. Coming to jobs, which is in everyone's mind when thinking of digital transformation, for good reasons, in that both the quantity and the quality of jobs are being affected by digital transformation positively and negatively. So to ensure that the transition towards the digital world of work in which everyone can succeed happens, key policies include labor market policies and regulation that promote a successful and fair transition from declining to expanding jobs, education and training to empower people with the skills needed to succeed in the digital world of work, social protection to ensure nobody's left behind, including those in new forms of work that we see emerging in digital markets. Tax and benefit systems need to be fit for transforming labor markets as well as for new forms of work, and are not always yet. And again, regional development policies can play an important role in addressing regional imbalances in transforming labor markets. Society is going digital too, and we need to make sure that this transformation of society is inclusive, improves well-being, and leads to social prosperity. Key policies to consider to achieve these objectives include social policy. Obviously, again, tax and benefits can play an important role, as I mentioned, in the context of transforming work. Education and training are key to reduce existing digital divides and to strengthen the foundational skills for life and work that often we see still being fairly weak in view of what is needed in a digital environment. As well as lifelong learning that is crucial to accompany people in this ongoing changing world. Other policies like environmental policies and health policies are crucial as well. environment, for example, it's very important to unleash the potential of digital technologies to tackle collective and global challenges, and technologies can play an important role here. Again, digital government is key in this aspect here to boost civic and stakeholder engagement, in particular, into the policy-making process. Coming to trust, a fundamental condition for the digital society and economy to flourish and to strengthen trust, key policies include, first of all, from our point of view, sorry that something up. From our point of view, it is crucial to take digital risk management as a central approach for all trust-related policies. For example, digital security risk management is crucial to be integrated by all actors that are acting in digital environments, ranging from individuals over organizations and government institutions. Privacy is key here too. Obviously, national privacy strategies, for example, are an important tool to address privacy, not only as a technical issue, but from a whole of society perspective. Consumer protection is coming to the fore very strongly again, key to protect consumers in all digital environments. That includes new types of markets like peer-to-peer markets, and also SMEs, again, an important focus here for policy in that they are often the most vulnerable to digital threats and the least well-equipped in dealing with digital risk. Coming to market openness, digital technologies transform how firms compete, trade, and invest, leading to greater competition in some market, but also tilting others towards greater concentration. And to foster market openness, key policies to consider are trade. We still see important trade barriers in many areas. Investment, again, barriers to international investment, for example. Financial markets to ensure good access to finance for all firms that are going digital. Competition. It is key here to closely monitor the changing competitive dynamics we see, including concentration tendencies, and again, taxation to make sure that tax systems are fit for purpose in the digital age. There's a separate, quite important project at the OECD called BEPS, Base Erosion Profit Shifting, that looks very specifically at these tax implications of the digital economy and how to review and revise national and international frameworks for taxation. So all these 7 dimensions should be taken into account when developing a digital transformation strategy. And so in the publication I showed you on Going Digital, Shaping Policies, Improving Lives, we have actually an additional chapter also on helping governments in the development and implementation of such a coherent and comprehensive strategy. So just one word about themes that you may see missing at this high level of these 7 policy dimensions. They can't possibly cover everything. There are a number of cross-cutting themes that you probably realized I've mentioned a couple of times throughout different dimensions. For example, skills or digital government, but also inclusion. So given that they are so cross-cutting, they are not one single dimension by themselves. To just go a little bit into inclusion, if you look at access, inclusion here is a crucial theme in terms of closing the rural-urban digital divides that we see in use. It is central in terms of closing the gaps in technology diffusion, for example, between small and large firms, but also amongst low versus high educated individuals. In innovation, it's there in terms of leveling the playing field and supporting young firms to succeed. In jobs, it is obviously very prominent. Think of social protection and skills, education and training policies in particular. at the heart here of working towards more inclusion, and in society, that is more than obvious to create equal opportunities to participate in the digital society for everyone. So I will stop here, but as you see, it basically goes through the whole framework, and we did recognize some of these themes very explicitly here under the themes angle, where you see that here's digital government, for example. There's other themes, gender, for example. If you go and explore here, what you see, and that's a little heads up on what I'll show you in a second, you recognize these colors. So there's actually indicators for different dimensions that are grouped here, because this is a cross-cutting themes, and then more material, in particular the policy analysis and policy guidance. This brings me now basically to the rest, or if not the rest, probably the current core of the toolkit, which is, again, as you see, structured around these 7 dimensions of the integrated policy framework: access, use, innovation, etc. And what we did here is, well, 2 things that the toolkit delivers. First, it helps countries self-assess where they stand in their own digital transformation. And second, it provides them a rich source of policy analysis and policy guidance that the OECD has developed over the years and keeps developing under each of these dimensions. And so it empowers policymakers in their own policy work, and more generally speaking, provides them comprehensive one-stop shop for the development of digital strategies. So to run you just through a few functions here, what you see here is basically this overview of what we call core going digital indicators. That is really a selection of indicators. There's over 200 indicators in the publication I showed you earlier on measuring the digital transformation. This is a selection of essential indicators that were chosen based on relevance, obviously, but also based on data availability, comparable data that we have, so we can actually get a pretty complete picture for most of the countries, and compare a country to the OECD average. That's what you see here. So let me just select a country, let's say Belgium. So you see Belgium now in the colored dots, so the lighter circle, and the OECD average, the black dots here. The Belgium is the darker part of the spider chart, and the OECD is the lighter part. So you do see the difference between Belgium and the OECD for each of these indicators, and gives you a really nice, quick overview of where Belgium stands, and then you can compare it obviously to other countries. Say Sweden, for example, and you see Sweden is actually performing really well on a range of dimensions, better than average and actually better than Belgium, not everywhere. But, and then you can look into more detail on each of these indicators. So if I go, for example, here on people buying online, you get to the next level. You have all of the countries here again represented as dots. And then you have the full data with each of the countries in the data set. And in addition, you get a lot of breakdowns. So you can look at the individuals buying online by age, educational attainment, many breakdowns here. You can obviously select individual countries if you're particularly interested in the comparison of selected countries, and you can instead of only looking at the latest data available, you can look at time series. So here you have over a decade of data on this data point that shows you the evolution of all the countries and which country is catching up how fast. You can obviously download the data itself or the chart, so it's designed to be really useful and easy to use. Maybe one last word about the toolkit, which is currently what you see here is a strong focus on the data side of things. We have, as I mentioned, a second leg of the toolkit, which is the policy side of things. So here we show the most recent and relevant OECD publications on key issues covered under each of the dimensions of the framework, and the policy guidance, in particular OECD Council recommendations. And we're currently working on building further both the data and the policy side of the toolkit, but in particular the policy side, where we are looking at a quite substantial list of policy issues that many countries are struggling with, that keeps ministers up at night, but where some countries have actually started with some really innovative approaches. So we do compact notes on these issues and present a range of approaches that we see emerging, so that, you know, this is really sort of as a very handy source of information to get an overview and insights on what are the other countries, other jurisdictions doing on these issues that are really difficult at the moment. So much for the toolkit.
Thank you so much. That was, I think, very helpful, and I think the OECD has done an extraordinary service to us all in terms of creating a tool that we can access so easily. Are there, because of the importance of this to our discussion, are there any questions on the toolkit and the 7 essential elements of the integrated policy framework? Please.
Just behind you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Margarita. I represent educators because I've been working as a teacher in private and public sector, so I've been focusing on global competence projects. So David, my question, of course, goes mainly to you. You mentioned education skills quite a lot, and it's crossing all the sectors, more or less. So we're speaking about digital transformation here. There are a lot of policies happening here. But there is one big issue in education, that it never gets to educators. And there is a vicious cycle that exists in education in curriculum design. And this is not only coming from my experience as an educator. We have a huge community of educators, international educators in China, around the world. But it's also backed up by this paper from the International Bureau of Education, which was published recently, that educators are not updated. There is no outreach that goes directly to people who actually create curriculums. And they have no idea what's happening in the digital world, in the world in general, in terms of the future, what jobs are coming. You mentioned the jobs that are going to be affected, and teachers who directly focus on developing those curriculums, they don't know about that. And that's a big issue. You have a great toolkit that shows data and can help people in policies to understand what's going on and how to update policies. But what about direct implementation of those policies of the future in terms of hands-on activities for people who are actually creating the next generation's education? Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much for the question. That is, obviously skills are one key area covered here, and as I said, it's cross-cutting. Now you're getting to the next level, so to speak, and more details. And on that, you know, you would go in any of those. Well, let me go to the theme page, and to the skills section here. 1 second. So. What you have here is, well, we talked about the data. And then if you look at the publications here, you have a really nice entry point on the work that the OECD is doing about skills. There is huge loads of work that has been done, obviously, over decades now. The past years have focused very much on education in the digital world. There's the last 2019 Skills Outlook that is almost entirely about this topic. And the one issue that you allude to is to include the teachers into, or skilling the teachers as a condition for having actually effective education in schools that includes digital technologies, because the inclusion of digital technology is only effective if teachers know what to do with it and how to do things, and to actually teach skills to pupils that are relevant for the digital world. And I just want to highlight here the OECD skills strategy, which is maybe a nice starting point for you to get at that, and it gets at teacher education. Obviously, teacher education is in itself a whole field that our education directorate is looking into. I just want to mention just my country, because we are here, Germany, which just launched a huge Digitalpakt Schule, spending 5 billion on equipping schools with digital tools. Now, that's not the only thing. They have done this based on a strategy that was developed 2 years ago by the states of Germany, which are doing the curricula of the states. And they have done a coordinated effort involving all the school representatives to come out with a strategy on education in the digital age that sort of creates a conceptual basis and the principles and guidelines for curricular development. And to this is now matched the Digitalpakt Schule, which brings in the technology. So you need these two sides for sure.
Can I say something on this, please?
Okay, and I think we have some other answers for you too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great example of Germany doing this implementation. It would be amazing to read about it so that other countries can also use it as a framework, but not all the countries are capable of doing that now. So the main issue still is how do educators use those amazing research papers that OECD publishes. Because they just don't even have access. So there are examples like ambassadorships. Teach SDG ambassadorship, for example, is a great way to spread out the information about SDGs to educators. Why not create something like this for educators so that more people can read your papers? Because from 2,000 members of my community of educators, very few actually get to read papers. And the work you do is worth reading. And it prepares educators for the future if they have access to it and if they are on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have some other insights from our speakers on the question you raised. Ben, what does Microsoft have to offer here?
Thank you, and thank you, Margarita, for your question. Very much agree that it's really important to find that way to reach through to the teachers themselves. Microsoft sees it as vital to adapt education and training to provide knowledge and skills that are going to be in demand for these new technology-related jobs. So there were just a couple of examples that came to my mind that related specifically to your question. These are both in the US, but we have a program that Microsoft runs called TEALS, Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools. And that started out where engineers, of which I'm not one, but engineers within our company started just volunteering to go into schools and teaching computer science. And then over time, the teachers are sitting in on the class and it helps them develop a curriculum in relation to computer science. The other example is something that LinkedIn worked on in Los Angeles. So the city of Los Angeles, LinkedIn provided data to the city of Los Angeles to help build out information on in-demand skills. And so this is a part of a local government program designed to help grow the city's tech economy. LinkedIn used the anonymized data of its members and employers that were based in LA. And doing that, they were able to map out the educational employment history of the local tech industry and also understand the current levels of hiring and the skills most sought in the sector. And so as a direct result of feeding in that data, I understand that 5 community colleges adjusted their curricula or their classes, and more than 400 young people were put into kind of paid internships in the tech sector. Thanks.
Alex and Jane, do you have anything that you'd like to offer at this point? Sure.
Thank you, and the question's really important. And in Australia, we have an added complexity in that the school system is operated through our states and territories rather than at the federal government level. So we have another translation point and therefore another point of failure. So the way the Australian government operates is by setting overarching curriculum policy in consultation with the states and territories. And we, about 3 or 4 years ago, set up a specifically digital curriculum as part of the national curriculum standards. The way that we've been trying to, I would say, incentivise the ways of teaching digital literacy and the digital economy more generally is by providing skills and resources available, programs to allow STEM professionals particularly to come into schools. We often find that, particularly in terms of the visibility of the digital economy and so on, it's important to see what the end product looks like. So what a career in STEM and digital looks like these days, because as you point out, teachers have a picture when they go through university, whenever that was, of what the system would look like. We recently released an initiative called Supporting Artificial Intelligence in Schools, which is a component as part of our AI Capability Fund measure. And the intent is to deliver curriculum development programs to support educators and teachers to tell their students what those activities are like. So we're trying to approach it through that way. So lifelong learning through micro-credentialing is another area that we'd be particularly looking at as a key way of delivering that. So.
I would just say I work at the grassroots level quite often, and we go to places. We don't suggest that we know everything about the cultural environment, and every country will be different, and obviously, even in countries, it'll be different from region to region in a country. But I think you've hit on something important about that spirit of education and transferring the learning. But it will take ambassadors of digital literacy and digital transition. Both of my colleagues here have mentioned that, and of course, I think with something like this framework, you're going to need to unpack it a bit and figure out how to layer the information so that people can pass it on. And educators are perfect for that type of thing. And I think it's an integrated approach because ministries of education working with ministries of communication, it's become almost a given now. In the past, it wasn't. That people need to work together across the ministries and government for an integrated approach, because this is an integrated sectoral approach across different pieces of economy and society. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. And the gentleman in the back, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. My name's Nano Katch. I work for the Canadian Regulator of Telecommunication Services. It's an amazing policy framework and toolkit. I'm just curious, you identify women, elderly, and low income as some vulnerable communities. Where do people with disabilities fit within that framework? And is there a reason why they're not explicitly identified, because arguably they're just as vulnerable as those other three communities? Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. They are part of the framework. I have not touched upon them. There's many things I have not touched upon. But if you go into the publications, I mentioned this toolkit and the synthesis publication from the first phase of Going Digital summarizes over 130 reports. So there's a number of reports that touch on inclusion issues and goes more into details of vulnerable groups. So if you're interested, happy to follow up on that.
Okay, well, we'll move on here and provide maybe some country examples of how OECD member countries are and non-member countries are endeavoring to implement this framework. Alex, the government of Australia played a very active role throughout the development of phase 1 of the Going Digital project. And has your country encountered any challenges in terms of implementing certain elements, and how have you addressed them?
Okay, thank you. And in responding to this, I might be able to answer your question as well in terms of the role of addressing people with disabilities. So I'll touch on that at some point. So late last year, Australia released its standalone policy for the digital economy after an extensive consultation period. So if you heard David's presentation, you'll see that the timelines for the development of the Going Digital policy operated basically in parallel. I wouldn't say lockstep, but they were happening in parallel with each other as the integrated policy framework was being developed by the OECD. So this had an advantage for Australia in that we were able to take into account the developments of the integrated policy framework as we were developing our policy, which is called Australian Tech Futures. So the Australian Tech Futures policy focuses on 4 key areas which align quite neatly with the dimensions of the Going Digital Toolkit. So these are people, services, digital assets, and the enabling environment. Against the category of people, or we classified developing Australia's digital skills and leaving no one behind. So we'd situate under that the jobs, skills, society, or promoting social prosperity and inclusion. And one of the areas, in answer to your question, which we've had a specific focus on is looking at where we need to improve our inclusion activities. Australia has a program called the Australian Digital Inclusion Index, and it looks at a range of particular areas where we need to focus on social inclusion. So they include older Australians, women, Indigenous Australians, which is another really important area. Particularly, I imagine Canada has got a particular area of interest here. People with disabilities, people in low socioeconomic groups, and people living in regional and remote areas. So again, the focus on regional and remote is one that not every single country would be as focused on. The role of the Digital Inclusion Index is to provide us with an information base so that we can understand and monitor whether the performance of our policy interventions is working and adjust accordingly. Going back to the program, the policy, we have another category which is around services and around how the government can better deliver digital services, which relates to the dimension of the integrated policy framework around use. And particularly one of the metrics that we're looking at in the Going Digital project is the use of government digital services, where Australia has been trying to establish itself as a bit of a front runner through our Digital Transformation Agency. Against digital assets, we have the dimension of building infrastructure and providing secure access to high quality data, which again relates to the increasingly effective use of digital technologies and data, but also enhancing access to communications, infrastructure services and data. And finally, the enabling environment. And under the enabling environment, we would include cybersecurity, reviewing our regulatory systems, and for a country like Australia, which is quite geographically remote, questions around market openness and access into international markets, and ensuring that trade barriers are minimised and don't exist to allow Australia to compete globally. So the Tech Futures policy is an attempt to bring together the disparate policy approaches that exist within the Australian system. It's the first time that we've brought everything together under one banner. We've previously, you could look across the entire system and find 20 different policies that were tech related. So this was our first attempt, informed by what the OECD work was doing, of bringing everything under some common thematic headings. Just finally, I wanted to point to the really important area of work which is part of the ongoing efforts of the OECD, which is around the measurement roadmap. And this is where we try and bring together all the disparate policy initiatives to understand whether they're having an impact. So we in Australia have been following a parallel track here as well in trying to look at how we can better measure our own activities in the digital economy, and we're very focused on what the OECD is doing in its roadmap for measuring the digital transformation. We all know that there's a lot of areas of the digital economy that are not picked up in our national statistics, so we don't feel like we have a good handle on productivity, issues around measuring trust, and market openness, and so on. So we're particularly focused in looking at where those areas can be picked up in terms of both Australia's work and then going forward in the OECD's activities. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Alex. I'd like to go back to this issue of the enabling environment and the importance of having the proper policy and regulatory environment to enable the digital economy to flourish. Ben, Microsoft has been a global leader in innovation, and what are your thoughts on the integrated policy framework, and importantly, how would you like to take this forward and create additional elements that would facilitate the development of new technologies and their applications?
Thank you, Barbara. So I'll talk about why an integrated policy framework is important to business, particularly a global one like Microsoft. But first, I wanted to say a little bit about why we think the OECD in particular is such a good organization to work through to produce this toolkit. I think it's noteworthy that the OECD is an organization that's focused on sustainable economic development and innovation. It has an evidence-based approach. It embraces the multi-stakeholder model. And I think as we saw, as David took us through those examples with a graph chart, the OECD maybe uniquely has the data and the analytical capabilities to try and pull this kind of thing off. So Microsoft believes that in order to achieve the vision and the potential of digital transformation, there needs to be integrated, holistic, joined-up approaches to policy problems. And there need to be clear objectives set by governments at the national level, just like the ones that Alex has talked about in Australia. And those national governments need to find ways to convene agencies to work together on how to achieve the objectives, because it's important to look at the digital economy as a whole. But while putting together the toolkit is an important step, we do now acknowledge the challenge of implementation, and it has traditionally been difficult for governments to bring issues together, not just because of the great variety of communities of interest across the digital economy, but also because it's not intuitively obvious always where the discussion needs to take place within national governments. Not every government, but most governments probably don't have a ministry devoted to the digital economy. So there isn't necessarily a natural convening platform within a government. And I think that's why it's important to have an implementation toolkit and a practical way of how to implement a holistic approach to policymaking.
In particular, Ben, and again, I'm thinking about the enabling and policy environment going forward. Microsoft has proposed the use of regulatory sandboxes to enable experimentation and innovative uses of new technologies in a safe environment, shall we say, a safe regulatory environment. Can you just explain to people what this concept refers to and how you think it might be useful?
Thank you. Yes. So I'll take artificial intelligence as an example. The potential benefits and the concerns are generally agreed upon. So the question is how you put guidance in place to encourage the development of AI technologies in a responsible way. And how do you encourage the use of the technology in ways that helps to meet the global challenges. And we also know that to enable the technology to be of most use, there needs to be experimentation in the ways that the technologies are used. So taking healthcare as an example, if you want to use AI in healthcare, there are clearly potential harms, and we want to better understand those through experimentation. And you can also use experimentation to understand how to apply existing laws to these new technologies. So in healthcare, that might be how privacy might apply when AI is used in healthcare. But if companies that are able to do this kind of exploring and experimentation fear steep consequences of potentially violating an existing regulation, then a regulatory sandbox is something that could help. So if we look at Singapore as an example, the government there published AI ethical guidelines. And importantly, they followed up by providing examples of ways in which data could be shared in a responsible manner. And they put out this vision of a collaborative data sharing platform. They were clear that they understood that not everything was known yet, and they made it clear that if a company has an application that they're not sure about, they could come to the government and apply for a potential exemption or a regulatory sandbox to enable it to do the experimentation. So what's interesting, I think, about this, it's not simply about making space for the private sector to innovate. It also provides a way for governments to understand what the actual harms are that would require regulation. Are existing regulations sufficient to address those potential harms, or is something new needed? And is that something new simply a new interpretation of existing laws, or entirely new regulations needed? So I think regulatory sandbox is a really great mechanism to help answer these questions. And they can provide a mechanism to enable innovation and experimentation in new technologies and new business models in a controlled manner, and while also helping governments identify the harms that need to be regulated against.
Thank you very much. Ben, that was very useful. I think, we've heard this term regulatory sandboxes batted around this week, and so I think it's important to understand in very practical terms what that would help and what it would enlighten us about. Jane, the Internet Society has been part of the global community of Internet users here at the IGF, and I know you work at the grassroots with individuals who are in the infancy of, perhaps in the infancy of developing their Internet connectivity. Please share with us how the Internet Society has endeavored to facilitate capacity building. What are you hearing at the grassroots? And I guess importantly, do you think the OECD needs to provide more targeted guidance for non-members in terms of going digital? Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess the overall answer is yes. They're more targeted and probably very specific use case examples. And I was just thinking audio-visual tools to assist, because some countries that don't have a lot of access are going to need a way to unpack this and integrate and implement it. But going back to your original question, I'd say one of the greatest challenges for non-OECD members will be understanding the context of the integrated policy framework as it relates to them at that national, regional, and local level, and understanding how well ministries are working or not together. As Ben had mentioned, and Alex, you've got to have an integrated approach across different ministries. If you don't, that cross-sectoral focus might be lost. Some countries I've worked in, the ministries were more like businesses. And when countries are in transition, there may be silos in government that prevent that integration and that cross-sectoral discussion. And that's really important, that you've got to recognize the environment that you're going into. Data gathering was something that was mentioned, obviously, by David, Alex, and Ben. I think you touched on it earlier, too. Evidence-based policymaking is something we all take for granted. But some countries may not be at that level where they're able to gather the data in order to provide that information about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and to level up on progress that they can make. This is something that we've also realized in the work that we do, that we've got to go in and create an assessment to help enable the environment. You've got to know what the environment is. And if you don't know what the user base is, the level of connectivity, how well government works or doesn't with each other, you may be starting off with what you think is a great way forward, and it's actually going to be flawed before you get halfway there. We touched upon the issue of access and limited infrastructure. This tool will be great for governments and stakeholders to use as a baseline, but if you have limited access to infrastructure, the critical deployment of infrastructure is something that you'll want to focus on, of course. Access is at the heart of what we do on infrastructure projects. Any change that occurs in a country to enable that environment is going to take human engineering. We often all go in, we think the project is going to work, it's easy, but it's 80 to 90% human engineering. You've got to get the local buy-in, you've got to know who your stakeholders are, and it takes layers of engagement going in one time to talk about something really doesn't work. You've got to come back and have a sustained engagement. And that's where I think through the OECD and through partner governments and other companies and stakeholders like ours, both at the grassroots, civil society, and technical community, you can create ambassadors, digital ambassadors across that level to help with recognition in country and training in country with local governments. Another aspect that I was thinking of when David was speaking is how you would integrate this into an already complicated environment of digital transition. Some countries are still going through the incumbent operator phase. I dealt with this 20 years ago. I'm thinking, gosh, all of that policy regulatory work we did to liberalize, privatize, bring in more integration, backhaul from the submarine cable landing station, things are being challenged right now at the infrastructure level due to security concerns at cybersecurity, which I'm finding as someone that's trying to go in and build infrastructure, it's really hard when governments are all of a sudden clamping down on access and infrastructure rollout in the name of cybersecurity. So you would need to go in and look at ways in phases and stages for that to talk about the transition and how they would implement the framework. Providing use cases, David mentioned Sweden. There are countries that have such excellent, and obviously Australia, don't want to leave you out. There are great ways that governments have learned in an iterative way through making mistakes. I used to work for a government, so I know. You can't, and as Ben had said, this is something which is experimental, and sandboxes are amazing. It's a great concept. I've worked with governments that thought that they put in a dispute resolution regulation, they were done. It was fabulously perfect. They're not perfect. And if you go in with a mindset that this is it, you're not going to make progress. And so I think these sandboxes are critical. We're actually working with CITEL through the Organization of American States with a deployment and regulatory sandbox. I think the OECD could do really well with partners and members to go in and work at that regional level to figure out how to integrate.
Thanks very much, Jane. Do we have any questions for Jane? I know Alex is prepared to talk about what Australia has been doing in the Pacific Rim, but I just thought first I would see if you have any specific questions for Jane. Okay. You know, I know Australia has shared knowledge and helped capacity building in some of the small South Pacific islands for which connectivity probably is an issue.
Thank you. Yes, and this goes to this question of making sure that you don't go in and just leave the tools and then walk away and expect people to figure out how to use them. So Australia's been using its aid program to build cybersecurity capability, and as part of what's called a cyber cooperation program in the Pacific Rim region. We've been investing currently $34 million over 7 years through what we call our cyber cooperation program, which is part of championing an open, free and secure cyberspace. The size of this program has been growing over time as I think we've been developing buy-in both within our own government but also seeing success on the ground. Through this program, we work with a range of implementing partners on the Australian side through our Attorney General's Department, our Federal Police, multilateral organisations such as the UNODC, our Australian Strategic Policy Institute and academic institutions. And we've been focusing predominantly on building cyber resilience across the Indo-Pacific. Key part of this, and it's maybe something that's not been reflected as much prominently in the Going Digital project, and I think this goes to this question about how you then connect Going Digital to non-OECD countries, is the alignment to achieving the SDGs. And so we've been looking very much at connecting our aid activities around using technology to address the SDGs there. We've been doing that through 4 particular dimensions. So one of those is through delivering training, including tailored training across the ASEAN region to build understanding of what norms of responsible state behaviour are in cyberspace. Cyber bootcamp projects, cyber law courses, and a range of other activities. We've also been funding activities to fight cybercrime, building cybersecurity capability in countries such as Tonga, Vanuatu, Myanmar and the Solomon Islands. and to supporting technology for development, where we've been providing case studies and blockchain technology to particular countries. So we're giving these countries access to cutting-edge elements of the digital economy to try and bring them up as quickly and leapfrog some of the activities that developed countries that have already got to. Things like e-governance readiness assessments and workshops are also key parts of this. Just finally, through our Pacific Step Up initiative, Australia has been providing funding to build what we call the Coral Sea cable system, which is a 40 terabytes per second submarine fibre optic cable, which brings next generation connectivity to the people of Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Which also includes a 730-kilometre submarine cable system that connects Honiara to Okai, to Nauru and Taro Island. So these are key parts of what we would call access under the Going Digital framework, but building that bridge beyond the OECD member states and out to other countries.
Excellent. Ben mentioned artificial intelligence earlier, and I'd like to go back to that topic. Earlier this year, the OECD endorsed principles on artificial intelligence after probably a 1-year plus effort by a group of dedicated experts. How might the integrated policy framework be utilized as a complement to help implement the OECD's AI principles and most important, ensure development of trustworthy AI? We've been hearing a lot of that concern this week as well. I invite any of the speakers to address this.
I'm happy to start because Microsoft has more to say about AI. As a developer and a provider of AI technologies. So we think about this from two angles, the AI ecosystem and society at large. And so Microsoft, as I said, we're involved in developing AI technologies, but that's only one part of the AI ecosystem. It also includes the people and the organizations that are involved in integrating, deploying, maintaining, and operating AI technology solutions. And we think that you need to think about that ecosystem as a whole. From Microsoft's perspective, we think about how we can develop our technologies in a way that would increase awareness of the need for trustworthy and responsible AI throughout the ecosystem, not just what we ourselves do as a company. And then the second element, or second angle that I mentioned, was society at large. What is needed to ensure that AI technologies are actually adopted and deployed to their utmost potential. And there's a couple of examples of ways that Microsoft's trying to make a contribution in this way. We have an AI for Earth initiative. That's a 5-year, $50 million effort to put Microsoft's AI tools into the hands of researchers and scientists that are working to solve environmental challenges related to agriculture, climate, biodiversity, and water. And there's a combination of money and technology. We provide grants for projects. We also make available open source tools, models, infrastructure, data, and APIs to support environmental scientists. And the other example is a program called AI for Accessibility, where we're focused on working with others to solve challenging problems for people with disabilities by making software smarter, making devices smarter, and making them more contextually relevant for people with disabilities. And for both of those angles, the AI ecosystem that we're part of and society as a whole, I think the integrated policy framework can give us guidance that might be in the form of specific requirements to feed into the AI ecosystem, or requirements to reflect the broader needs of society, like trust, skills. And maybe touching on something that Jane said, it can also provide guidance about actions that can be taken in complementary policy areas. So not necessarily how AI should be developed and how it should work, but connectivity and access, so that there is more democratized access to AI, and the deployment of these technologies doesn't exacerbate the digital divide.
Yes, just maybe to add to that, that the way we look at any specific technology like AI or any other technology in what we would call the technology ecosystem that underpins digital transformation, any technology really can have effects across economy and society, and thus could be relevant in any of those 7 policy dimensions. So just to illustrate this with AI, if you think of access, when we look at access to data, that's a crucial aspect of enabling AI. If you think of the use dimension, the adoption of AI in firms, for example, is crucial here. If you think of innovation, new business models that can be enabled by AI, jobs, obviously implications of AI for the changing nature of jobs and the changing tasks that are carried out within jobs, society, the ethical implications, and one pillar I would want to highlight where I think there's really very strong complementarities with the guidelines put forward by the OECD is trust. There's a couple of these principles that have very concrete implications for trust. To highlight, for example, the 3rd principle on transparency and explainability, or the 4th on robustness, security, and safety, and also the 5th on accountability. All of these are really key to enhancing trust and that as a basis for digital transformation. And looking at it the other way around, what is in the trust dimension of the framework, thinking of security, for example, and privacy, these are also crucial areas where the implementation of the policies we discussed there help the development of AI and sort of provide the context in which AI can flourish.
Jane.
I'd like to just rest on the point that David just made about trust. It's that building trust with the community and from the governmental layer, from the OECD, from our, the Internet Society, from Microsoft. There's some fear, obviously now, with respect to technology. And I'm not going to get into the why. There's been a lot of discussion about that this week. But one key thing that everyone, I think, is recognizing is that information is critical if you're building a community of trust and a community of interest. So getting that data out from both the OECD side, the government side, and all of us who know that connectivity leads to socioeconomic development, how we promote that is very critical right now to the future of how that infrastructure is developed. So if we can help build that level of trust and understanding, you can definitely get through a lot of complicated issues and help with adoption of technology and that infrastructure.
Thank you, Jane. That leads to the next point that I wanted to raise about trust, which is an important pillar of the integrated policy framework and certainly a theme we've heard throughout the week. How do we find that balance, developing policies that enable digital transformation, yet safeguarding privacy protections, ensuring a secure internet? It's a difficult balance, but I know some companies, some governments, some organizations have devoted a lot of time to drilling down into that and developing thoughtful approaches that are aimed at enabling that innovative potential to be realized, but also safeguarding personal privacy protections. I would be curious about Microsoft's approach to this and the other speakers.
Thank you. Microsoft sees privacy and security as being inexorably linked. The proliferation of connected devices and cloud-based services has opened up new avenues of attack for cyber criminals and other malicious actors. And so protecting our customers and the wider community is a responsibility we take seriously. And we believe privacy is a fundamental human right, as more of who we are and what we do is recorded and stored in a digital form. Preserving this right to privacy becomes more important and increasingly difficult. So Microsoft as a company takes a principled approach to building trust and makes strong commitments to privacy, to security, and compliance. So looking first, people talk a lot about the GDPR. Microsoft invested a lot of time and money to ensure not just that we would be in compliance for the data that's processed by Microsoft, but that we can support our customers to ensure that they're compliant. And we didn't just make sure this happened with regard to the data of people in the European Union. We extended the protections enjoyed under the GDPR to all of our customers. And there are a couple of other principles in this area that we follow and we would recommend to others. We think organizations should be required to establish sound privacy practices. Privacy laws should require that organizations can demonstrate that they've established sound privacy policies and that at a minimum they can ensure compliance with legal requirements. And that principle should apply both to organizations that collect and process data, so you might think of a bank or a hospital, and to those that just process the data on behalf of other organizations, so cloud service providers like Microsoft. The other point is about the way you design privacy laws and how that might or might not enable data analytics. We wouldn't want privacy frameworks to be so restrictive that they prevent governments, businesses, and other organizations from using data and analyzing data to draw insights, as long as that's done in an ethical manner. And one way that privacy frameworks can achieve this balance is by encouraging the de-identification of data sets, which allows researchers to continue to innovate, but not at the expense of the personal data of specific individuals.
Any other comment? Alex?
So from an Australian government perspective, so we see the intersection of privacy and security as being two parts of the same coin as well. So we support an open, free and secure internet that drives economic growth and protects national security and promotes international stability. We think that this actually provides the foundation of trust and confidence for government, businesses, academia and civil society to then share its ideas, collaborate and innovate. So we recognise that governments have to play a certain role in regulating the internet, but we've been very clear that it's not one of control and that state-centred models would restrict and fragment the network, inhibit innovation and constrain the opportunity that's presented by connectivity. So we look at questions around data localisation through this perspective as potentially a barrier to trade, and so the most prominent example of this is in the WTO context at the moment. So Australia has been working to support the continuation of the WTO moratorium on customs duties for electronic transmissions, which we see as a big barrier to electronic trade and digital trade. We would actually like to see it made permanent, and which is in line with the commitments that we've made in a number of the FTAs that we've been negotiating, and in current, so concluded and negotiations currently under negotiation. The main reason that we're against these custom duties is because it will increase the cost of goods purchased online, and we think that that means that it will lower the opportunities for economic prosperity and act as a disincentive for customers and suppliers to engage in the digital economy. The other aspect which has been mentioned around data localisation is this question of how to manage privacy. So Australia recognises the importance of effective privacy protections that avoid barriers to information flows and to ensure continued trade and economic growth. We have a Privacy Act which currently allows the cross-border disclosures of personal information in a range of specific circumstances to facilitate free flow of information across national borders while ensuring that the privacy of individuals is respected. So we have a privacy principle which requires that before an entity discloses personal information overseas, it must take reasonable steps to ensure that the recipient does not breach the privacy principles in Australia. So we've been working through, in terms of cross-border data flows, through the APEC cross-border privacy regime, which we think provides a mechanism to facilitate the flow of personal information across borders. And in that context, we've announced a review of our Privacy Act in March this year. and a process to set up legislation to strengthen penalties and enforcement under our existing Privacy Act. So we think it's actually on the penalties and enforcement side rather than the regulatory side per se that we can achieve some of these outcomes. The reforms will include a binding online privacy code, which will apply to social media platforms and other online platforms that trade in personal information, which would require them to be more transparent about the data sharing activities that they undertake and to meet best practice standards when seeking consent to use personal information. Just finally going to the, the point made by Ben, is that we are very interested in understanding what the technological developments are that might address some of these issues. Cloud-based services, things like the Gaia X initiative that the EU is pursuing around whether we can have trusted cloud provision that aligns with privacy regimes while maintaining security. Thanks.
Jane, do you have anything?
I would be remiss from an institutional perspective at the Internet Society if I didn't say that we are promoting strong end-to-end encryption as a way to also secure information and build more trust as well. I think it's important, many countries in certain regions may not even have focused on privacy, so the examples that my colleagues have given are a way that to take advantage of other governments and other organizations implementing at a very simple level how to deal with privacy from a governmental and a corporate perspective. We've worked closely with the African Union to come up with some cybersecurity principles that also touch upon privacy. These principles were worked in a bottom-up fashion, but I think you still, once you have principles, you can't just rest on those principles. You've got to go out and work with people from the bottom-up perspective to understand what they mean so they can implement them. I think that's something I've seen when I was a regulator and policymaker. You can come up with the best regulation, policy, or guideline ever, but if people don't understand how to implement it and make it walk, it's going to sit on a shelf and may not be effective. So that's something I think that could be done through the OECD, through companies, through governments, through organizations like ours, to really understand what it means to put those regulations, policies, and sort of cross-sectoral guidelines together.
This is a very important and sort of tricky issue, striking a balance. So does anybody have any questions from the audience on any of these points that they'd like to raise with speakers at this time? Okay, I'd like to turn quickly to an issue that Alex raised, data localization, and we understand how Australia views that, but I would be curious for the other speakers' views on its efficacy. I know USCIB as an institution does not support data localization. We feel that it is indeed a trade barrier and that it actually makes a country that has those sort of policies more vulnerable to privacy and security breaches because the data is centralized in one location. But I'd welcome other panelists' views.
So I can kick this one off. I think we've recognized that there's distrust and there's concern about the power that increasingly resides with the large technology firms. And I think you can see these data localization laws where countries are requiring data to be kept within the country's borders. I think you can see those digital sovereignty solutions as an effort to counteract that balance, reflecting this kind of larger trend of distrust. And those data localization laws can be well-intentioned. They can also be costly to implement. You lose the efficiency that come with the global scale of the cloud. You undermine the fundamental benefits of cloud computing. And this is an interesting element that I don't know if people have picked up on it. It's possible for global companies like Microsoft to build sovereign cloud systems, which we do for the US government and the Chinese government. But the extra cost and the complications make it harder for smaller companies to do so. So kind of creating a barrier to entry for local cloud providers. We think that a more effective approach is to adopt regulation that's aligned with global standards or global contract standards that protects personal data regardless of its location. And such an approach can help to improve resilience and security and to make data processing services more efficient by reducing latency. But of course, I think it should go without saying that it's incumbent on data processing companies like Microsoft to understand the laws in each country of origin and make sure that that data is managed accordingly.
Thank you. We're kind of down the home stretch here. I noticed we're down to our last 15 minutes or so. Just to kind of wrap up, the importance of having healthy public-private partnerships and collaboration has also been a recurring theme I've heard throughout the week, and it also appears in many OECD recommendations, such as the AI Principles, the 2013 OECD Privacy Guidelines, and the 2015 OECD Security Guidelines. Alex, I understand that the government of Australia has proposed building relationships between digital end users and governments, so-called co-creation. Would you elaborate on that proposal?
Thank you. So the discussion around co-creation arises predominantly in, well, two areas. One which is a slightly more positive one, and one which is the more challenging one around terrorism and violent extremist content. I wanted to touch briefly on the development of Australia's AI ethics framework, which has been following this co-creation model, partly informed by some of the work that the European Union has been doing through its high-level expert group on AI to develop ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. And Australia has been in the process of consulting on the development of those and is now going through a piloting process of those guidelines. So it's an example where we're trying to set up a framework that isn't enforceable per se, to allow companies to understand how they could apply it in this new area. AI is a fast-moving area. We have only just established AI principles several months ago. So trying to make sure that we don't stifle innovation and create a regulatory framework that we're trapped with, allowing our companies in Australia to actively engage and give us feedback on that work. And so we've been working with the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, the National Australia Bank, Telstra, which is our big telecommunications company, Microsoft, and Flamingo AI trialling these principles. And we're also working with the EU as observers on their high-level expert group to understand the lessons that they're learning through the piloting of their process, which concludes in December. So this is one example where governments are seeking to develop regulation, but to do it in a way that is openly consultative and iterative. The other more challenging one, which is around addressing terrorist and violent extremist content, has arisen as a result of the Christchurch massacre. And there was some discussion earlier this week about some of the work that's been going on there. So there's two developments that I wanted to point to. One is around the IGF2019. Some people may know about that, which is the Global Internet Forum on Counterterrorism. So it's an example of a forum of online platforms coming together to try and take responsibility, let's say, for their role in the dissemination of terrorist and violent extremist content, and to put in place practices that will stop that from happening, take down rules, and very basic things like making sure that companies understand the definitions of what terrorist and violent extremist content actually is. This is particularly important for smaller companies. In our experience, we understand that the larger companies can deploy quite a number of resources. I think Facebook said they have 350 people focused on this problem in their organisation. Smaller startups, SMEs, which are an important part of the digital economy, don't have that capability. And so there's a role that governments need to play in facilitating and brokering that activity. So we were pleased when the IGF2019 announced that they're going through a process of establishing their governance arrangements, which will have governments participating in that. The other strand of work is some activity that's being undertaken through the OECD as establishing what's called a voluntary transparency reporting protocol. Which is an example where we're trying to understand what the common definitions of terrorist and violent extremist content are, and try and incentivise companies to address this. The main lesson I wanted to point out in the context of this co-creation idea is that The first workshop, which took place in Boston a month or so ago, brought online platforms together with governments from a range of different areas, from our cybersecurity, our counterterrorism areas, digital economy areas, and had a very robust, frank and private conversation. And that was the most important thing, is that it was very much a process of learning lessons. And I think this is an area where there's a lot of opportunity for governments to work with online platforms in what's moving very quickly, and whether we can extend that beyond things like terrorist and violent extremist content into other domains, I think is a process that we should explore more closely.
Yeah, I just add one example for a PPP from Colombia, actually, which I found really fascinating. Colombia just we just undertook a review of digital transformation of Colombia, and they are hard working on the implementation of the recommendations from this review. And one of the initiatives they've just recently announced is to work together with Coursera, the online digital learning environment, with the objective to have 150,000 students being trained in programming and other ICT skills by mid-2020, 2022, which I think is a really nice example for PPP, but also an excellent example for how to use digital technologies to address a key challenge, in this case, skills shortages in Colombia, by using digital technologies and to tap into resources that are not necessarily there in the country, but that can, in a very efficient manner, help build up the capacity in the country.
I'll just say that without partners, we can't do anything. So it's public-private partnerships that are helping us build that critical infrastructure that all of this rides on, or transfers or transports over. We've worked recently, and I'll give you a specific example, with the government of Georgia to put in a local infrastructure in high mountain villages. Without the government of Georgia, our local chapter, the Internet Service Provider Association, Tusheti Economic Development Foundation, this is the region, and other aid development agencies, we'd never be able to do what we can do. And I was just in Tbilisi about 2 weeks ago. USAID, the World Bank, the Tusheti Development Fund, partners, other community networks that are being built, came together, and everyone's putting in either human resources and experience or funding. And so we've actually created that environment of collaborative connectivity development, but we're also trying not to be the single point of failure in that collaborative partnership, where we bring in other partners, and so we start to pull out as far as funding goes, and they come in to help create that more sustainable baseline of the pyramid. But you can't build infrastructure, and you can't have some of all of these fabulous things if you don't have that connectivity. So I think the public-private partnerships, as David was saying and Alex, across the different sectors and at different layers with content and rules that you need to put in place, especially with a Christchurch call, you've got to work together. There's no way to do it in a siloed manner anymore.
Any other questions or comments from the audience? Yes, please, sir.
My name is Bilal. I'm a vice chairman for Afghanistan Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, and my profession is basically a chartered accountant. It's good similarities that I work for the telecom regulator, but by profession I'm a chartered accountant. The problem we have in our country is the financial inclusion, which paved the way, the digital inclusion, or the internet, which paved the way to facilitate the financial inclusion. In Afghanistan, there is a big challenge for us. Accessibility wouldn't be a problem. We can make the plan how to access and how to bring the people on to access to the internet, but the main problem is how we should tackle the problems in order so that the people can rely on the internet, which pave the way and make it much easier to familiarize with the financial inclusion. The big problem we have is the reliability of the internet transactions, and that is the big barrier that we couldn't succeed it. We worked together, the two regulators, the Central Bank of Afghanistan and the regulatory body for the telecom sector, they work together, but still we have the same problems. Any experience or any how we can tackle those problems? Thank you very much.
I would say that bringing people to your country or working with you to bring some of your experts to those experts to help create a better understanding of what you could do with both from a security perspective, that financial inclusion. It's complicated and it takes time and expertise, which you do have in the country. I've known some people from your regulatory body and your ministries, but it is a matter of expertise and sharing that expertise and knowledge with you and what works best in your country, because you know your country better than anyone. But the question is, what is it on that infrastructure side and the banking side? GDPR, you had mentioned it earlier, is that for some banks around the world, they're thinking, I'm not even at that layer of dealing with GDPR. I'm trying to secure my bank and provide that financial stability for the country as well and build up the reserves and trust and stability. But I would say that this is a matter of working with some international experts and your own experts to come together to figure out a good solution for you, because this is a lot of training would be involved. And that's where a lot of governments and companies do have that type of expertise and that knowledge transfer. And you could teach them a thing or two, I'm sure, as well as you, going forward. But it's a matter of trial and error as well. And we can't afford that trial and error when it comes to the banking system. So it's something that we've also been promoting on the encryption side, is that banks really have to have strong encryption and strong technical expertise. I think people forget that you do need an IT team, but it's not just any IT team. You need a really experienced IT team now to secure your infrastructure. So that's something that could be a partnership arrangement with an organization to come help you.
Okay, everyone. I would like to thank all of our speakers for generously sharing their insights and their expertise with us, and I hope you'll join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you participating, and I'm sure any of the speakers would welcome your questions following the meeting.
not set up correctly. So we're gonna try and make do with what we have. So let's come closer. Yeah. Are you come to the session or you just?
I'm peeking in for a few minutes. I have to catch a train.
You have to borrow the mic. Oh, use the mics around. All right. Can you do me a favor? I know Maureen is trying to get in.
Yeah.
I don't know. They said the Zoom link is online. I don't know what the Zoom link is. Can you send it to her? If you go to the IGF website.
Okay.
The guys don't be very helpful with that, so they just send it to the website and get the link.
Okay, so send to Maureen, the
Maureen,
link, the Zoom link.
I know she's probably frantic trying to get in, yeah?
Okay. Anita, where are you from? I mean, besides Trinidad.
Ministry of Health.
Ministry.
Is it level 30? Is it level 30?
It is 11:31.
Right. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Dynamic Coalition for Small and Developing States in the Internet Economy Roundtable. That's not so round. We're going to have to, I guess, like we do in the small island states, adjust accordingly based on our resources. Thank you. But we're good at that, so we'll just adjust. So what's going to happen is that since we don't have mics at our desk, we're going to have to share mics. So I'm going to pass, so we just have to use these mics and just pass them around. Yeah, so whenever you're ready to talk. All right, so let me have a seat. So thanks all for, I know it's normally a small group of us from SIDS. I believe we have Maureen, have you got Maureen on us here? All right, so we should have at least one remote participant from Cook Islands, and I believe there are a few others coming in from the other islands. So let's hope they're joining us. We have some help. Is there anybody online, remote, as yet? Yeah. Maureen is on. Maureen is on her. Hilliard. Hi, Maureen. Hello. Anyone else? All right, great. Thanks. So we expect a few more to join. And so this is supposed to be a working meeting, right? So we're not presenting anything as such. But there will be interventions coming in from Maureen, who shortly I'll call upon her, and myself for the Caribbean update. And what we're going to do today is try and get our action plan sorted out and approved. And we're going to try and get our way forward done and approved in terms of what we're going to do next. So, based on, I have threw up the agenda on screen. Maybe we can get the agenda back up. That's right. So the first item, report from SIDS on local IG-related projects. And for this, if Maureen is ready, can you ask if Maureen is ready? All right, Maureen, can you intervene and give the update from the Pacific perspective? Good morning, Maureen. Early morning for you. Yeah, we need remote audio.
Hi everyone, this is Maureen Hilliard from the Pacific. I've unmuted my Zoom. I'm just wondering if you can hear me.
Yes, Maureen, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yes.
Right from the Pacific. I'm not quite sure if everyone was able to get a copy of the Pacific report.
No.
Oh, okay. I hope you can distribute it actually, or I can send it to people who, if they would like to, or if you're members of the Internet Society, they've actually sort of like put it onto their latest ISOC newsletter. Apparently, they quite like the fact. I mean, it is very much related to the work that we're doing within the Pacific Islands chapter of the Internet Society, plus the work that the Pacific is actually involved in ICANN. But there are sort of like several activities. I mean, really what we're trying to do is just get involved in as many different activities as possible related to internet governance, and it's something that's actually sort of like certainly developing. But as we go through the action plan, for example, some of the things that we're working on in relation to enhancing the work that we're doing across the Pacific is actually sort of like becoming a little bit more progressive, I guess, in relation to the relationships that we're building with regional organisations. And I know that, for example, one of our sort of like key issues is re-establishing our PAC-INET, which is our one sort of like opportunity to gather together as a Pacific community. But when you've got sort of like 22 countries sort of like spread across the Pacific Ocean, it isn't an easy task to sort of like try and coordinate things together. And we do, so we have to rely very much on regional organisations to sort of like support, what we're doing and how we can make it more possible. And I think I'm very grateful for the support that we get for activities that we run in the Pacific from ICANN and the Internet Society, and especially from APNIC. They've been very supportive of us, and .Asia. So it's sort of like we're getting, sort of like Asia Pacific support into our work. And now we're sort of like branching into support from APTLD and Internet New Zealand. So, I think that this is where, the work that we do isn't just sort of like, centered, focused on a particular country or, sort of like a small section. We have to look at what we can gather together from across the region itself. And one of the things I've just actually sort of like swapped over from the School of Internet Governance session, is it next door or wherever, but I was very pleased to sort of like hear about the SIG that has been established in Trinidad and Tobago, and being a small island state community. I think that I'd be really interested to see how that was established and how we might incorporate that into our regional sort of like conference sort of that we're trying to organise. And I do note that in the audience, Ganella Esprink from our region is in the group. I'm really pleased to see her, our latest MAG member, and so congratulations to you, Ganella. Nice to see you. And I'll stop there, Tracy, if there are any questions.
All right, thanks, Maureen. So I wanted to get Maureen up early if it's late for you and in case you need to drop off. So before I allow you to drop off if you need to, does anybody have any questions for Maureen on the Pacific update on last year's work? Any questions for Maureen? Otherwise, we're going to move into the actual introduction spot. Any questions or comments on Maureen?
I certainly won't be dropping off.
Okay, excellent. Well,
I'm
great.
sticking
So
with
we
you.
fantastic. Thanks. All right. So we did a little bit of a back to front. So I'm now going to ask everyone, since we have the as normal with our DC, to sort of introduce themselves. And obviously, we're going to have a little challenge with the mic. So let's see how resourceful we can be. So I'm going to ask my colleague from the Maldives, who I met yesterday, to introduce himself, and maybe. As you're there, maybe you can give an update, since I haven't seen the Maldives at the IGF recently, so you can give an update as to what's happening in that part of the world. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Sharif. I'm the Permanent Secretary of the Science and Technology Ministry. Our ministry is just recently established. In fact, we're just celebrating our first year. So for us, everything is very new. This is our first IGF and our first SIDS working session in IGF. So we are looking forward to engaging this civil society in Maldives as well now. In the past, the internet governance has been, I guess, domain of the government and domain of the ISPs. And civil society's voice in governance of the internet has been negligible in Maldives. These couple of days here has inspired me. So I'm looking forward to establishing the Maldives IGF in the coming year and connecting with all of you. And I'm hoping to actually, I mean, from the few faces here, except from my brother here, everybody else is new to me. So I'm hoping to become part of this family. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can pass the mic. But before you move on, how many islands are in the Maldives?
Let me briefly describe Maldives for you. Maldives is known as a small island developing state. But for us, we describe Maldives slightly differently. We describe Maldives as a large ocean developing state. Because in fact, if you look at a map, you will not find Maldives. Not because it's not there, because the landmass of Maldives is less than 1% of Maldives.
Wow.
And on a map, you only draw the land. Everything else is blue, right? So for us, the country is big. It's comparable to the United Kingdom. But you cannot draw it because the landmass is small. We're talking about 1,200 islands, on which about 200 islands are inhabited by Maldivians, and then another 200 are dedicated resort islands. So for us, the biggest challenge we have is the changing climate. Particularly, I mean, everybody talks about the sea level rise, but for us, the immediate emergency is already there. It's what we call extreme weather. When it rains, it floods, and this didn't happen before. And when it's hot, islands run out of drinking water. So we have ships that are desalination plants, just going from island to island supplying water. So this kind of, and the end, so what happens is transport is fueled by diesel, which, so while we give people water, we destroy the environment. A vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So this is what we are looking to kind of work with. So emerging technologies is what we are looking forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kanan from the Republic of Kiribati and Maori, yes. And it's one of the island nations in the South Pacific region. And so, as Maureen spoke before, the report on the Pacific, I would just like to add on, maybe probably something that we've been doing in Kiribati in terms of internet governance. So we recently talking with UNESCO to deploy the assessment on the universality, internet universality. And I think this is what we believe it could be a start of building an internet governance ecosystem, because in Kiribati, nobody knows about internet governance. Our major challenge is basically the rise of sea level. We are on the forefront of that. But equally important, as we know, is issues of internet, especially on cybersecurity. So we will receive our submarine cable in 2 years. That's the first submarine cable. And we anticipate that there will be a lot of challenge. And we recognize that these moments are the critical moments to get ourselves ready. And so for next year, like I said, we will work with UNESCO to deploy this assessment that will give us it's sort of a gap analysis. Where should we improve ourselves in terms of the policies and regulations and things around the internet governance. And so the other thing that I also like to add on to what Maureen said before, maybe she forgot to touch on this. In Vanuatu, they just established their Internet Governance Office. So this is another great achievement in the Pacific. So Vanuatu has taken a great leap in this, and it's something that we look up to try to imitate that. It's a good achievement. And yeah, basically that's what I can say at this time.
Yeah, thank you. And just to let you know, my colleague is from Youth IGF 2016 in Guadalajara. And now here he is, government, participating in the IGF. So well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe pass it on to the current youth ambassador, Isaac. Yes. Who are you?
Hi, my name is Vivian. I'm a youth ambassador from Isaac, and I'm here doing the report.
Where are you from? Small island?
No, I'm from Brazil, a big country. But still, so it's a very important discussion that we are having here, since small islands face different kind of problems and issues that, for example, in Brazil, we would never imagine to. So it's good to be aware of what is happening around the world.
Thank you. Pass behind.
Hi, everyone. I am Faye from Jamaica.
Wow.
I work for the telecoms regulator in Jamaica.
Welcome.
I recently noticed they launched the ISOP chapter in Jamaica, but I guess it's so recent that nobody's here. But nonetheless, in Jamaica, we have a competitive telecoms market similar to Trinidad, but the competition has reduced a bit since the mergers between telecoms companies. So now we're in a state where we have to figure out how to encourage the telecoms operators to be investing more in the new technology, because mobile penetration is very high, but in the rural areas we still have a bit of problems where some persons don't have access, and even if they were to be provided access, they're still a little bit uneducated in about the potential of the internet. So we also have to look at trying to increase the literacy, digital literacy in Jamaica right now. So that's where we're at. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I just wanted to also underscore that Dulcie from Vanuatu is here, but she's not in the room yet. She's supposed to be joining us shortly, so she could. Yes, excellent. Who are you?
What? Is it afternoon? Good afternoon, everybody. I have no idea what time it is, but it's lovely to see you. Merry Christmas, everybody, in advance. So I'm Salanyata Tamanika Waimaro, but known to most of you as Sala.
Hello, Sala.
Yes, lovely to see all of you. I'm originally from Fijian, but I now live in the United Kingdom. And so we just launched a startup UK think tank called Credo Global, which is based out of the UK, pivoting off a UK-based charity which has been in existence for 30 years. But one of the things that we're doing, of course, is partnering with the landlocked developing countries and small island developing states to better bridge the issues. And as we know, we've faced challenges on the ground, even in the Pacific, particularly in terms of traction. And so hopefully my being in the Northern Hemisphere is to just build a bridge to be able to do more together with local partners. But as Delphi is coming, Amelia Kamanalangi Muriel, who represented us in the Day Zero event, the digital inclusion, she's carrying the Pacific voice with respect to the thing that was held on the Day Zero event, which is the electrification, access, and digital inclusion. So one of the things, as my colleague on my left was saying in relation to Jamaica in terms of penetration rates, one of the things we're finding is even in jurisdictions where you have 100% electrification rate like Barbados, June Paris is not here.
She's with Dulcie in another session.
Yeah, she said she's going to come.
Yeah.
But one of the things that she mentioned was that even with 100% electrification rate, they still have challenges, which leads to internet outages. And of course, the ramifications is obvious in itself. And the same thing we face in the Pacific too. Even in Fiji, I've seen reports of, within the past 2 weeks, of severe electrical outages that have kind of crashed the comms, and the complaints is coming from all the IT engineers, obviously, on PKISOC and on the PAC-NOG list, and also on the Facebook page. So one of the things really would like to do is to learn from Trinidad, learn from Barbados, learn from Jamaica, learn from everybody, really. Gunella's in the room. She's on the mic. She'll be fighting our issues. Woohoo! Yeah, she'll be fighting our issues, and hopefully one of the things we need to do, like, you know, that Day Zero event, Wisdom had to fight for 3 years on the Meg to get that session recognized, and it wasn't even recognized in a formal workshop. So we are hoping that we can have champions in various strategic places in the Meg and also in other key areas to better bring our issues, small island developing states issues, to the fore. Because even though decisions are not made, but they're certainly influenced in terms of traction, funding, prioritization, and that sort of thing. So for now, that's all I'll just say.
Thank you, Saal. That's all right. That's what we're here for.
My name is Toshi from Japan ISPs Association, a vice chair. So also the Japan is an island. But probably you don't know that we have more than 1,000 islands. So maybe more than 300 islands that people live in. Then, but we have so many problems in Japan, so we are struggling, fighting for that still. Then probably we can share the practices or experiences. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that.
Hi everyone, I'm Abigail Antenor, or you can call me Abigail. I'm from the Philippines.
Oh, yeah.
And as you know, in the Philippines, we have over 7,641 islands. So that's really a lot. And there are still some far-flung areas in the Philippines that are not connected to the internet. And what I wanted, as I go back, is to maybe have a sense of inform them what is really internet governance and to engage the youth more to tackle issues on digital inclusion, digital literacy, and such. Because in the Philippines, there is, I think, little engagement, but I think we could do this together to bring the youth more in the IGF. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
And she's also a youth ambassador, ISOC youth ambassador.
Yes, I'm from ISOC Youth Ambassador.
Thank you, Abigail.
Hello. Good morning. I can see it's still morning. Now, my name is Unita, and I'm from Kenya. Now, I'm here because anything touching on developing states is of interest to me because my country is still developing. So I'm attending this forum basically as sort of a benchmark platform because in my country we are in that space where we are developing cybersecurity laws, data protection laws, and I believe that the challenges we are facing are common, and with the comparison, then we'll know where we're going wrong, because we are again facing so many litigations as we try to implement the laws. So I find this a platform for sharing and for learning new ideas and development. It's my first time at IGF. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Jensen. I'm a South African based in Brazil and Portugal. And in my consulting capacity, I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of studies in the Caribbean, in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific around developing ICT infrastructure, the underlying physical infrastructure ranging from submarine feasibility studies to establishing internet exchange points and satellite connections and restructuring the telecom sector. And this kind of turned into a personal passion for me. The small islands, I find, are probably going to be the last to be fully connected, because these very remote islands with low population levels and low income levels, it's extremely difficult for commercial operators to justify the investment to bring these people online. So what's interesting to me of recent is I've been working with the Association for Progressive Communications on what we call bottom-up connectivity, where remote communities build their own low-cost infrastructure. They're getting fed up waiting for the operators to come and connect them, so they've taken the initiative into their own hands and started to build their own backbone infrastructure, ranging from digging fiber cables to setting up wireless networks to even setting up GSM mobile phone networks in remote areas where the regulations allow. And we did a study last year. We visited about 12 networks in 12 countries and 16 networks to document this process. And I think that this might be a very viable strategy for some of these very small island states. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Rabindra Jagannath, Rabindra Dani Jagannath. Dani is easier to pronounce. I'm one of the directors, and we have a few here in this room, from the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group. And I'll laughingly say that I feel so insecure because we only have 2 islands in Trinidad and Tobago, not 600 and 2,000 and whatnot. Nevertheless, it's interesting that the topic of small island development states is being explicitly addressed within the Internet Governance Forum, because there are unique issues related to actually small island development states. And even within the let's say, gathering or the collection of small island development states, they're all different issues that need to be addressed. Of particular concern for me is because in small island states, government has a very significant role to play. Whether that's good or bad, it doesn't matter. It ends up government having that major role to play. And the issue is, how do we influence them in really matters related to the internet? Not all governments understand the internet, understand how it can actually benefit the country. And our multi-stakeholder advisory group, we actually organize the Internet Governance Forum on an annual basis. We come up with concrete recommendations, but very little of it is actually adopted by government. So the issue is, how do we get to a position where we can influence our governments more positively, influence them to do what is right for their country, but using internet more effectively? Thank you.
Hello, it's exactly good morning. 1 minute will be good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Khatib. I'm a graduate of environmental governance from the University of Freiburg, and I'm from Egypt. I'm interested in small islands, because, like, as Unita has mentioned earlier, it's developing. I'm from a developing country, and I also am very interested in similar topics. I'm also wondering how the internet economy can really help small islands, whether in the Caribbean or in the Pacific or so on, and how it can help them, A, to bolster their economy, and B, to mitigate climate change and find ways where they can, promote their agenda as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Cristina Morales. I am from Nicaragua. Now I am the Public Policies Analyst in Nicaragua for IPANDETEC, an NGO based in Panama. Nicaragua is not an island. It's like it's a country in the middle of Central America that also is in the middle of America. And for example, in Nicaragua, we have small projects about the internet development. We have been doing some projects for teach to the kids in the rural areas of the country how to get knowledge about the digital rights, how to prevent the human traffic in the border of the country. And also we are teaching how to develop the software apps and also use the new technologies for develop the economy of the rural areas of the country. So I would like to learn about the other countries, what they are doing, how they are doing the process, and that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And another youth at IGF graduate from 2017.
Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Atif Aleem. I come from India. India is a vast country comprising of around 1,200 islands, which include marine, riverine, and lake entities, island. And the most prominent one is the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is at the juncture of Bay of Bengal and the Andaman Sea. And I'm very enthusiastic about this dynamic coalition on small island developing states, because in news we read that though the telecom sector in the Indian island states have been working as smoothly as comparable to their neighbor states, like the landlocked ones, but there have been infrastructural issues in spreading the internet services like 4G. So in January 2019, the Indian government, along with the private player public partnership program, launched a 4G services specific program in Andaman, Port Blair Island, to upgrade citizens and make awareness about what internet is about, and they are giving free upgradation to 4G services. So I look forward to discussions here in deliberations, and next year I would be also hosting the Youth IGF Summit in India. So it would be great if we could have this perspective of island states and how it's going to shape the economy of internet in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And you are from, you an ISOC?
I am an ISOC Youth Ambassador from India as well, and I'm note-taking for this session too. Thank you.
Hello, and my name is Gunilla Astbrink from Australia, which is a ridiculously large island. But I'm really here as a very strong friend of certainly the Pacific Island countries. I have been involved with Pacific Island projects probably over the last 10 years or so, giving workshops at PAC-INETs, which is the Pacific Internet conferences, and also at PAC-IGF, probably around 6 different countries. I've given workshops about people with disability and looking at cultural, societal barriers and what a difference the internet can make for people with disability to increase accessibility to education and employment. And I've done some work in Vanuatu, specifically looking at government websites to see how accessible they are, and also developed a project on collecting data on mobile phone usage by people with disability in Vanuatu, and assisted with data collection across a number of other Pacific Island countries. So yes, I am an incoming MAG member, which is very exciting. So thank you very much for your congratulations, maybe commiserations, we'll see. But I hope to work hard on small island developing states issues, Asia-Pacific issues, disability issues, but generally to make sure that digital inclusion continues to be part of the IGF agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We're so privileged to have a MAG member with us. Thank you, Gunilla.
Hi everyone, I'm Anita Sohan. I'm from the Trinidad and Tobago MAG, along with Danny and both Tracy and George. So I represent government on the MAG, but really Ministry of Health. So I'll just add to what Danny was saying before. In Trinidad, we're good at developing a lot of policies and legislation, but I think a challenge for us is really implementation. And I see that as a challenge for a lot of small island development states as well, particularly because we have a resource challenge and we have other issues that, you know, people might think are more important than internet government or ICTs. So there's really a lack of understanding, especially at the political level in terms of driving these things forward. So I think key for us is to get that political sensitization. So while multi-stakeholder collaboration is necessary, as Danny was saying, sometimes it falls back on government to get things implemented. So that's one of the things on what I'm really looking forward to at this session as well, is to see how we could really build capacity and to try to push internet governance issues forward in each of our countries.
Thank you.
Hi again, everybody. Nicole Peter Patterson from Caribbean Girls Hack, and she leads an NGO out of Barbados. We're focused on digital skills training for girls across the Caribbean.
You're from Barbados?
Yes, I is from Barbados. I am from Jamaica. We are Caribbean here, and very excited to welcome our colleague from GSMA, Tamara, who is here. Also a member, I'm a member of the Equals Skills Coalition, the ITU Skills Coalition, with Tamara and other colleagues. And we're focused on gender, on training girls in digital skills, as I indicated, to bridge the gender divide. We have had, over the past 3 years of doing the hackathon, a 600 and something % increase in terms of participants, and we are very happy to continue to be engaging with the SITS Coalition so that we can benefit from the larger islands like Australia and also the smaller islands in terms of seeing where we can have best practices that we can replicate, with focus being on young women and girls. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome our colleagues to the round table that's not so round. But we'll come across you to introduce yourselves shortly, so stand by.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ria Yaching. I am from Trinidad and Tobago, but as head of an ICT and development nonprofit called Corvella Foundation, I get a really nice opportunity to participate in many of the development initiatives across the Caribbean. I also support the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States in more specific development initiatives in the Eastern Caribbean, and in those activities and initiatives, I support a lot of work in the area of infrastructure, which over the past years, of course, has been under tremendous pressure, particularly in the area of disaster recovery and resilience. And so we do have a lot of initiatives focusing on trying to get last mile access to some of the rural communities, as well as emergency access, which continuously seems to be a challenge. And then focusing on all of the other initiatives and streams that overlay the infrastructure, so ensuring that we can have proper digitalized platforms and services for government, reaching people, financial services. I'm glad to see Kenya here, because that's one of the areas that we look at to be able to see how that can influence many of the adoption in digital financial services in the region for financial inclusion. Then, of course, entrepreneurship, skills, and so on. So it's always good to be here to see what everyone else is doing and be able to collaborate.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Gubin, and I'm from Trinidad. I think the folks from the Trinidad group have said enough about what we do in the TT Mag. And as Danny said, we're 2 islands, but we happen to have almost 5 representatives here for this session today. I wear 2 hats in that I'm a director of the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, but I'm also a part of the CCTLE, or the DOT, that manages the .tt domain. And I think that's a good strategy if you in your territories, islands, can get your CCTLD to invest in the TT Mag. Most likely, your Mag is coming from a 0 bank account or nothing to invest in it, to have your IGF sessions. I think it's a good best practice that you develop that relationship with your CCTL. We have been sponsoring, for example, the TT Mag for 3 IGFs now, 2017, 2018, 2019, where the investment comes from us, but we're looking for buy-in from the governments in investing because of the importance of internet governance. So if there's anything that we can share with you as a group, as an individual, country, island, please feel free to reach out to us, and let's share some best practices with you. Thank you.
We have some new colleagues came in the room. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. I'm June Paris. I'm from Barbados. I'm a member of the MAG at the United Nations. I'm also a member of the Internet Society Barbados chapter. It's nice to be here with so many from the Caribbean, because this is the first time I'm seeing so many all under one roof. I thought they were absent, actually. I thought I was the only one. Anyway, I've been involved with the Internet Society, and I've been involved with several organizations, Girls Power Tech, Caribbean Girls Hack, happy to see Nicole here. We're trying to get the girls in Barbados to be more not even computer, IT literate, and to give them, I feel actually it's more like a confidence thing, because of the men, because the men are so like at the top of everything. It's nice that the girls are being encouraged to do the same thing that the men are doing, and even better. My problem is that I can't seem to get them to come to the IGF. It's because of the expense and because of lack of funding and other issues. That is my goal for next year, to try to get as many people as possible and to try to get some funding to get these girls, these really brilliant girls, to come and see what it is at the IGF. And hopefully, before I leave the MAG, I've got 1 more year, I would have passed on a lot of what I know to these girls. That's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have 2 MAG members in the room, which is quite a hyper. 3. Dulcie, oh, that's right. Dulcie is a MAG member. That's a high proportion. Fantastic.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amelia Kamanalangi. I'm from Pacific Nexus, based in France. I'm here because we had a panel on the first day on electricity and internet penetration, trying to point out that one infrastructure needs the other to be able to be sustainable. And also in the Pacific, with a high rate of, with all the climate change being an issue, so we're trying to look at the renewable, a sustainable, renewable source of energy to coexist with the internet for good penetration and reliable as well. Thank you.
Okay, not sure, good afternoon or good morning? Both? Okay, maybe a good day. So my name is Talsi Banyala. I'm from Vanuatu. I am one of the MAC members. My role last year is I'm the former regulator for Vanuatu, and I have been involved a lot in the internet governance activities in the Pacific. We actually the one hosted the Asia Pacific governance last year, and actually the outcome of that forum, we created the Vanuatu National Internet Governance, and I am very, very happy to have the Secretariat here who attended the sessions, and we have learned a lot, and at the same time contributing with our experiences to support each other and to see how we can help each other in the small economies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalcy, and good to see you again. All right, I think we've done the introductions. As I said, this is a working session. But first, maybe I could try and replicate what Maureen did by trying to give a Caribbean update as well. If I could find the document. And I'm going to try my best to... Oh, thank you.
Did you introduce yourself by that?
Yes. Oh, I didn't... Oh, I'm Tracy Hackshaw, sorry. From Trinidad and Tobago, and one of the co-conveners or co-coordinators of the EDC, along with Maureen Hilliard. All right, so just a quick update from the Caribbean. I'd like to start with Guyana. Guyana sent an update in saying that they recently completed a skills training program for local web developers to help develop applications for persons with disabilities. The University of Guyana is currently exploring the possibility of integrating that program into the computer studies curriculum. Part of the overall support was provided by the Ministry of Finance, who also granted VAT exemptions for persons with disabilities purchasing smartphones and related devices. The ministry also, via its agency, the National Data Management Authority, is in the process of providing internet access to 150 communities in hinterland areas, some 250 plus miles away from the capital city, Georgetown. Now, Guyana, which is considered a small and developing state, is actually on the continent of South America, and is not an island, but it's defined that way by the United Nations. So some of these points are very interesting from the standpoint of rural-urban divide. So 250 miles away from the capital city, Georgetown, the overall goal is to provide connectivity to close to 300 hinterland communities in the south of Guyana. The ministry is also conducting train-the-trainer sessions to begin the process of ICT training at the community level. At the CARICOM Council of Trade and Economic Development ministerial meeting in November, they agreed to propose to the CARICOM heads of government that a combined approach be made to the regional telecommunication firms to eliminate roaming charges throughout the entire Caribbean region. I think that's an interesting point. So remember in the EU, they've eliminated roaming charges throughout the EU region. So the Caribbean is trying to do something similar in the, among the islands in the region. They indicated that they also had a national roundtable discussion that will begin in December on the development of e-commerce legislation and a draft national ICT strategy. And these discussions are intended to reflect the views of the private sector, academia, and civil society. So that's read into the record. St. Vincent and Grenadines sent an update. They convened their second IGF on April 12, 2019, under the theme, The Pressing Need for Security of the Internet of Things. It was held at a school in St. Vincent, targeting student population. Key discussion points surrounded AI with IoT devices, IoT and policing, securing devices. And Trinidad and Tobago sent an update, well, a couple of updates. One, that we held our TTIGF on January 25th, 2019, and we'll hold our next IGF on January 31st, 2020. The Internet Governance Forum in Trinidad this year was using the same theme as the IGF from last year, was called the Internet of Trust, and we featured 3 panel sessions, one on Caribbean data protection regulations, or CDPR, cultural factors in the Caribbean affecting trust and privacy for digital security, and using technology to increase trust in public institutions. We had approximately 85 attendees, and the website IGF2019 hosts the relevant documents and archive stream. And in addition to that, we had this Caribbean Telecommunications Union acknowledged 7 technology pioneers for their contribution to Caribbean internet governance. Melford Nicholas, the Minister of State for Information in Antigua and Barbuda, and President of the CTU, presented Bernadette Lewis, the Secretary General of the CTU, with a special recognition for Distinguished Service Award for initiation and leadership of the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, which had its 15th anniversary. We got awards were received by Nigel Casimir out of Trinidad and Tobago, Lance Hines from Guyana, Jacqueline Morris, Trinidad and Tobago, Carlton Samuels from Jamaica, Devanand Tilak Singh, Trinidad and Tobago, and Bevel Wooding, Trinidad and Tobago / Caribbean. Also received Excellence in Internet Governance Awards for their pioneering work in supporting regional and global internet governance. So with that, there's also an update from the Caribbean Girls Hack. And what I would like to do maybe is ask Nicole to sort of segue. We have 30 minutes, what I'll do is get that done now, and then we move into the work plan. So Nicole, perhaps you could give an update on the Caribbean Girls Hack, and then you had I know you had a little announcement you wanted to make regarding what can happen next for us. So maybe you can, Nicole, go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Well, let me start with the announcement first. The announcement is we need all of our small island partners working even closer with us. Please, because I know that we had spoken last year, Maureen, there is a lot of lessons learned that we can benefit. Sorry, Saal, across the different countries, across even the different regions. So this year we had the Caribbean Girls Hack in 5 countries. We got a lot of support from June, really connecting us excellently, because the thing is that there is then administrative or organization infrastructure, yeah? As Rhea and I are discussing, the importance of being connected not only with the IGF, but also with the ISOC chapters that are in various countries, and as much as we can do. And we would really like to get a lot more involvement of the Youth IGF and Youth ISOC chapters as well, because you have so much that you have been doing across all of your different portfolios. With Caribbean Girls Hack this year, we were in Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada. But, and from that, over the last 3 years, we've experienced a 600 and something % increase in terms of engagement and participation, but we still have much further to go. The work for the hackathon in terms of, so the idea is to upskill the girls in terms of getting them to focus on specific sustainable development goals. And this year the focus was on climate change and resilience and on gender-based violence. So with the training that they received, which has not yet gotten to the level of coding, but that's what we're hoping for next year and going forward, and to have a more multi-year focus. They created solutions themselves that they then pitch in a hackathon competition as part of the ITU's Girls in ICT Day. But it's not, I mean, our realities in the Caribbean is that for when we have school holidays and that kind of stuff, it doesn't necessarily have to be on the day. But as Doreen Bogdan-Martin from ITU says, every day is Girls in ICT Day. So one of the things that we're very excited to announce for next year that we're working on also too is a partnership with, that we will be doing as a member of the Equal Skills Coalition, where we want to roll out looking at doing a curriculum that will have tied with it some sort of certification. So the idea is that for the various levels of the work that the engagement that the girls will be doing, largely through webinars, so it would be online, and it's a lot of instruction that you have to do and that kind of thing, they would be able to be getting different levels of certification. And the idea is to tie that in. We're in some discussions with specific countries to tie that in so that it can allow them to benefit and step forward in terms of work opportunities. So we're very excited about that. We're going to share with the SIDS Coalition Group more information from that as it develops. But I just want to just reinforce also too exactly what June was saying vis-a-vis the confidence factor that, for instance, in Barbados, which was the very last hackathon that was held at the end of summer, that the team that came forward with a gaming solution on climate change and resilience. And as I say, a gaming solution. It's not a school that, or it is a school that once I've said to everybody that, you know, this was a winning school, everybody said, really? It wasn't the more popular, well-known schools. And that, I think, is just a reinforcement that it's not that you have to look to the academically superior or whatever it is kind of institution in terms of the future world of work. You know, and one of the things that we've been doing through the hackathon, and these girls also got through the hackathon, is that through ISOC Barbados and IGF Day, which was a part of Smart Barbados Week, they actually presented their solution to a whole audience of people who are in government and in development and that kind of stuff, speaking and actually, you know, delivering it. And so that has, in terms of their feedback to us, translated to significant confidence in terms of them speaking, you know, and being visible. Being visible, exactly, as the comment that June was mentioning. I'm very happy to see a lot more of the colleagues from Trinidad here who I hope to see at our next hackathon and to work even closer with you. This year we worked with the Ministry of Public Administration, so we hope to work even closer with you so that we can make sure to close the gap on that. Thank you very much, Tracy.
Thank you, Nicole. Oh. All right, so we're going to begin our working session. Before that, anything remote? Colleague from remote moderator. Hi, hello. Anything from the remote side? Any comments? Any inputs from Maureen? Okay. Yes, Maureen.
I'd just like to add, and just to sort of say, it's absolutely fantastic to sort of like hear and be able to share, you know, like what's happening across our SIDS communities, and also I want to acknowledge Kanan and Saal and Dulcie, you know, that who are actually doing amazing work in their, you know, with in the areas that they're working in. But I did want to mention, and I really support the sort of like the raising awareness of what women in ICT are doing within the region, and I know that it's something that the Anju and Cherie on the PICISOC board have been working very hard at sort of like making sure that, you know, there is more awareness of what, you know, a women are doing in ICT within the Pacific, and it's a very strong group. I mean, when you've got, you know, sort of people like Dulcie who have, you know, like she's the former regulator, and did some amazing work in regards to setting up the regulatory system within Vanuatu, and she's very strong sort of like support for the development of internet in Vanuatu, which is one of the reasons why it's one of the, you know, like leading Pacific nations. And I think it's you know, like, I mean, these sorts of things need to be promoted. And of course, you know, like we do need to get more support from the younger generation within, you know, who are actually sort of like looking, you know, who are our, you know, they're the work that we want to do in the region is going to be very reliant on their involvement, and we need to get their involvement sort of like in, you know, get them involved, you know, as much as possible. It's just that, you know, like when you sort of like spread so far apart, it's so difficult to sort of like make those sort of like connections and give them the, you know, it's always funding that actually sort of like prevents us from getting some of these amazing youngsters together to actually sort of like work together and to look at how we can actually move the internet forward. But thank you very much, everyone, for, you know, sort of like the sharing. So I'll let Tracy get on with the business.
All right, thanks, Marie. So, as I said, this is a working session. I'm going to now ask colleagues in the tech team to bring back up the agenda. All right, so right now that's the report and the sharing. Go ahead. Yes, Saal? You have to have a mic. Can somebody get a mic, Saal?
Testing.
Go ahead.
With your permission, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Salaniata Tamanikamero for the transcripts, or Sala for short. I'd just like to, this is just a petition, I suppose, to the coordinators of the Dynamic Coalition. And I'm only making this intervention because there are 3 Meg here now.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who used to serve on the Global Meg and who's left, and this is in terms of strategic movement forward for the Dynamic Coalition. So you know how at a country level or territory level, for example, in the Pacific we have 27 countries and territories with CCTLDs, but not all of them are nation states within the UN. Some are territories under New Zealand and that sort of thing. But it doesn't make them any less as far as we're concerned, as far as the SIDS is concerned, right? So you know how governments in their own country, or the countries themselves, have sovereignty and are in charge of their development, and they rely on global development agencies like the World Bank. For example, Tuvalu right now in the Pacific has just signed on projects with the World Bank where they've had a five-year funding to build infrastructure. Or even as my friend Kenan from Kiribati was saying, within 2 years they're laying their first global submarine cable. So in terms of an international, the development agenda level, one of the things I'd like to put to the Dynamic Coalition, and again, this is all of us, right? If we can work on in the future to put together publication, like before the next IGF in Poland, like the case studies from all the countries. And so, for example, like we have the Women in STEM, or the Girl Hack, that's happening in Barbados. And I just wanted to say, development, the Google search engine, or the search engine, literally came out of a developing country, Barbados, right? The guy who first designed the search engine came from a small island developing state. And I'd just like to point out something that the former Vice President of Qatar Airways said on Monday at the Amelia's panel. This is what he said. Look, you don't have to look to developed countries for how to build, because you have the capacity within yourselves. And so our strength is in our synergy, as my friend from Girl Hack Barbados was saying. And so this is one of the things I want to put to the DC Coalition. Apart from the publication, having a global public repository where we can actually store this who's doing what, for example. So for example, Vanuatu they've been sending girls' teams to the robotic competitions in Dubai every year. Right, Dulcie? Yeah, and there are women in STEM initiatives also in the Pacific. So things like that, so we can streamline and better leapfrog. So one of the things we would like to put to the Dynamic Coalition, if you wish, Credo Global is available to assist in creating this global public repository to, to sort of, and also assist with compiling the case studies in collaboration with whoever wants to volunteer. And the other thing I wanted to say from a very practical level, I am tired of seeing our countries beg for funding to build infrastructure like global submarine cables, satellites. Like in the Pacific, where we have the biggest ocean in the world, 2/3. Pacific is 2/3 of the world's ocean. And so, even with the satellite, you've got KCU band. Apart from that, this satellite networks, apart from the cable, the submarine cables, But I'm tired of seeing us beg for the funds. And we've had how many IGFs where we've heard of community networks and solutions, and it came out in the Day Zero session. Like people like Glenn McKnight, who are rolling out cheap models of community network, and even ISOC, who do amazing stuff in Africa and that sort of thing. And so I think the level of cohesion and collaboration that needs to occur can actually be catalyzed from the dynamic coalition. Does it make sense? And so here we have, and I'm sorry I'm taking long, but I think it's important I say it with the 3 Megs and everybody else in the room. You have the Secretary General directing the Meg to comply with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, right? And within the UN, you have the second committee that deals with infrastructure funding. So in other words, African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, the regions of finances of infrastructure, they come to the UN Second Committee to listen to what's going to be prioritized. And a colleague from Trinidad and Vanuatu sort of said that, look, as far as foreign policy and statecraft is concerned, and we all know this, we've been advocating in this space for a long time, ICT just doesn't make it to the, for small island states, to Geneva and in Brussels and New York. Why? Because the resources are so constrained, the technical capacity needed is not there. So even though you have technical capacity on the ground, but it's missing from where it needs to happen, the advocacy in Geneva, the advocacy in New York. So this is what I propose, guys, that we host us, Dynamic Coalition, guys. Woohoo, rock on. Anyway, just kidding, that was just to warm up to bring the, not to make it too serious. I say we host a symposium in Geneva and in New York. We leverage on our networks, we build our portfolio case studies, and we tell them where we want things going. And so, in other words, this is what I'm saying. We just don't want to come and talk about what needs to be done, but we can have the capacity to influence and direct funding where it needs to go. Does it make sense? And also share to pivot off the lessons from people like Glenn McKnight or local community networks that are already being rolled out that we know nothing about. That somebody from Christmas Island, you're on the PICISOC list, Tracy. You've seen Christian talking about how he wants stuff on Christmas Island, but they can't afford it. Yeah, so just that. And with that, I rest. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, it's a very good segue into the working session. So we have 21 minutes and 41 seconds left. So what I'd like to do is, there are just a couple items we're going to be doing now. So there is an action plan that was created last year. Let me get this to work. There we go. And maybe I get the screen up. I don't know if people can see this. All right, let me see, can I get it any larger? How does this work?
Can I make a comment while you're finding that particular?
Go ahead, comment.
Yes, it's going to last, Brink, and certainly Saala's comments about community networks and building infrastructure are really important, but hand in hand goes digital literacy, cyber safety, and we really need to combine those. So it's not just saying, okay, the infrastructure is vital. Just as vital is making sure that people who haven't been exposed very much to the internet applications and so forth go in and use it safely and in an effective manner.
Thank you. So hang on. So let's get this going and we could insert. The idea here is to get some stuff inserted into this action plan. So everything that's coming out so far sounds like items to go into the plan. So let's move the plan through and we can insert as we go along. I guess I'll be the one typing, but I'm going to rely on we've lost one, but rely on my rapporteurs to give me some documentation of what's happening now. So as you can see in this plan, we had a few items to get going. The ones that are crossed off have happened already. So I'll share this with the list again. But now we have 5 more things on our 10-point list. Item 1 is development of a website. So one of the things that we need to do as a DC, and this is some practical stuff to get going, is to develop a website. Otherwise, we'll be just talking at these meetings. So we need to get some platform built, whether it be utilizing an existing platform and use that as a website, or we're going to build our own website. That's something we need to get done. And the action is, as you can see on the right-hand side, volunteers required. So I heard Credo Global volunteering to do things. So let's see if that's going to be one volunteer that's added to the mix. Anybody else want to volunteer? Nicole Peter-Patterson volunteers personally to build a website. Great. So I'm having my scribes, rapporteurs take that note. Good. So the current time frame is to start from today, November 2019, and get it done by January 2020. So can we get commitment on that? January 2020 to have something up at DC SID's website, or is that too ambitious? That's right. And I also think that I did hear that the secretary is temporarily hosting stuff in the meantime, so we could probably use that to start with, but we'll see.
Yeah. Even if we got independent hosting or use the secretariat hosting, but if we can get one of our CCTLDs, or if we don't want the CCTLDs, we could get like a .org. The CCTLDs can actually sponsor. Sorry, CCTLD operators. I'm just asking if they could kindly sponsor the hosting for .org. Let's use .org. I'm suggesting, not dictating. Yes, for us to host a website. And really what we need is a sitemap, and it can really be built. I shouldn't talk about the builder, but like if we all collaborate and design the content, it shouldn't take long. Good. So Jan 2020 is not a...
So this is not an ambitious target, so January 2020. So can we agree on, basically what I'm doing now is I'm going to literally ask us to adopt the action plan with the date. So I'm assuming that we are adopting that by January 2020 we'll have a website. Yes, any objections? Any burning desires to not have that date locked in? All right, hearing no objections, I shall move on. All right, so item 7 is an establishment of platform to support. So this is exactly what Saal, there's a burning statement to be made. Go ahead.
Tracy, okay, establishing the website, but we also have to deal with content for the website.
Yes, thanks, Dan. Well, yeah, so that I don't want to break everything else out, but yeah, that's the item. So to do logos, we have a whole set of things to get going under that rubric. So you still think the date is reasonable, given that?
Yes, Salah, for the record, volunteering to help with the content and also the sitemap. Not
All right.
volunteering to build it, but volunteering to get the content from archived things in the IGF Secretariat and working with Tracy Hackshaw, of course.
Thanks for volunteering me, Salah. All right, the more substantial item is the platform to support IGFs in SIDS region. So this is sort of dovetailing in a bit with what you started talking about, not exactly. So this original action item was to ensure that we get more IGFs going in the regions, so in the Caribbean Pacific regions, and having that platform, meaning that for those who already have them established, Trinidad and Tobago, for example, Vanuatu, the Pacific IGF, the Caribbean IGF, etc., to work with the other countries and territories to get their IGFs going as well. So as you would have heard with the UN's report, and it seems as if it's going in this direction, the IGF Plus seems to be the favored direction, where the global list of IGFs grows to such an extent that that becomes the sort of the intersectional work that's being done around the world. And if that in fact is what triggers in 2025 and beyond, then we want to ensure that every single territory within the SIDS has an IGF working, and ideally even a regional IGF or sub-regional as the case may be. So this platform across Pacific, Caribbean, Indian Ocean, I don't know if you, again, I'm not sure, is that a correct statement that you're in the Indian Ocean or is it on the African side? Maldives. Indian Ocean. So the Indian Ocean territories, and of course those in the closer to Africa, we have to get them involved as well to get their IGFs moving, funding, content, toolkits, best practices, etc. I'm looking now, I'm not sure what the word is volunteers, consensus that we will work towards that within the DC SIDS. And this is not going to be easy. Try and find a way. I was going to suggest a subcommittee of sorts to kind of work on this, to get it going. Yes?
If I could just make a comment on the number 8, like several things you said there. One was to support the national, regional IGFs. So when you were saying that, did you mean in terms of technical capacity where we share human resources? Because that's certainly one, and we've already been doing it. We've gotten the Caribbean into the Pacific, and that sort of thing. And I was thinking we need to break that down when we say provide a platform. So it could be exchange of human resources, one. The other thing you said was supporting the NRIs to allow the national initiatives. So at the moment, when the local NRIs, Delcy can elaborate, when countries want to do their IGFs, they have to rely on local sponsors, obviously, like the telcos and the ISPs or the CCTLD operators, but also they are able to reach out to ICANN or ISOC or to IGFSA, which is run by Marcus Kuma. But I would just want to say those funds are drying out, you know what I mean? And they're not sustainable, which is why I really liked your TT Meg chair, the comments that he made, like looking for ways. But if we were to do a global fund pool for that, that's certainly something, Tracy, that the committee could look into. But also in terms of the sharing, I think I'll stop there for now.
All right, so can we agree that we're going to establish some sort of, I won't ask the entire DC SIDS to do this because I'm not sure that will be reasonable, but a coalition of the willing within the coalition. So I'm hearing Saal already volunteering.
And can I just say, sorry?
So?
We have the head of the Japan ISP Association here. You know, most people don't know he's head of the Japan ISP Association. I only know that because I'm from the region. And he's the most influential.
I hope you didn't regret coming here, no?
No. We love you, you know. Yes. And, you know, when we look at ourselves, we don't see ourselves as grasshoppers, right? Like it's not what's in our pocket. Because if we look at what's in our pocket as a DC, we're probably in deficit, right, Tracy? But we don't look at our pocket. We look at the collaborative pool, the collaborative bucket. And we have Singapore, Japan, Mauritius, and even if we don't have the financial capital, we certainly have the human capital, RIA, you know, and you know what I mean? And so I was thinking, if we map what we have and pivot on that, oh my goodness, watch out Poland, IGF, and development. The nations are rising. Does it make sense? So that's what I'm trying to say is, we really got to get our act together and stop begging and start dictating how things should be run. And I know that the 3 new MEG IGF members are going to really be assertive. So it's going to be awesome.
All right. Any further thoughts on that? Japan, ISP wants to add anything?
Yes, I will do my best also. And probably you can, on behalf of myself, probably we can support many things, and also I will try the best in Japan to get some money or probably other things, technical issues or something.
All right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Ria?
I want to endorse what Saal is saying, but I want to take it slightly differently. I actually think that we should be doing a SIDS IGF on our own. And with a SIDS IGF, if you will, we will actually be able to ventilate many of our issues in a more specific way, much like what the global IGF is doing. But very much related explicitly to our own reality. And in doing that, if we create certain roundtables to cross-pollinate our related issues, then we begin to find singular lines of collaborative opportunities. And if we bring all SIDS, wealthy or not, into the room, then we find our own SIDS financing opportunities where they already have sight to some of the issues related to the poorer SIDS operations. And then that becomes not just a fertilization point for financial resources, but also a fertilization and incubation point for human capacity cross-fertilization. So I just want to throw that in.
So if we, so that's a...
that
sort of,
I would volunteer to.
Right, so we have a volunteer. Yes, I vote, as George says, what's the correct phrase? I vote that nomination cease? Yes. And so Ria is volunteering, Ria Yoching, volunteered to lead that initiative. She can't do it by herself, obviously, but certainly she would lead the... And Nicole is volunteering to help. Fantastic. Excellent. And Saal is... All right, so let's... So all rapporteurs, are we grabbing these names? Saal, Ria, Dulcie, Nicole, all to help with the SIDS IGF and the platform. All right. And Japan, ICT, ISPs. Yeah. All right.
And if I can add one thing, let me add one thing. I think we should locate this in a strategic way so that we do have our donor collaboration partners at the table as well, if not in a physical vicinity, but strategically placed.
All right, perfect. So, yes, as far as I saw June first, and then we can go to Nicole. Yeah, June. Can you need to get the mic because it's yeah.
I was just saying you can add me as a volunteer in some small capacity because we've got all these big experts here.
Accepted. Nicole?
Two things I just want to say. Salah, in terms of what you had mentioned vis-a-vis, pulling together people in Geneva, I mean, that's part of where I'm saying to Rhea that I would be happy to volunteer on this because one of the things that I'm going to be doing when I'm back in Geneva, which is where I'm based, is putting together a Caribbean group of the missions, and we had very strong engagement from the ambassador of Trinidad and Tobago, Ambassador Antoine Cambridge, here with Equal. So I think I'm saying to Rhea that I think we have the opportunity also to bring an even bigger group. That group was focused specifically on equals and gender issues, but we have an opportunity to pull together the SIDS missions, if we want to call them that. So I'd be very happy to give that contribution on that side to pull that together with Rhea.
Thank you.
And the others.
Thank you, Nicole. Accepted. Go ahead, Salah. You could we need to use the mic though, forget it, please, yeah. I do apologize but we're very resourceful here, so we'll figure it out.
Just before Delphi speaks, just to respond, you remember the Fiji missions, Fiji ambassador, when we convened the other IGF in Geneva, we hosted the SIDS.
The zero event.
Yes, the zero event. And so that opened the pathway. We got Bevel in to meet her as well. And so that's really excellent with the Trinidadian mission. So we've already got the network to pull it through. So I think we should just do it. Yes. And here's Dulcie.
Yes, we have 5 minutes. Go ahead. Yeah, okay. So we have a SIDS IGF plan. We have a platform to get IGFs going in all of the SIDS territories as well. Item 8, which is sort of an offshoot of that, was to get specific IGFs and ICT events going. That was something that we determined was a peculiar need that needed to be established. Since the PACNets, yeah, that seemed to have disappeared. That was identified by that ISOC to get going again. But that sounds as if we could pull that together with the previous action item and make that happen along the way. Although the PACNets, I believe, are not necessarily IGFs. They are a little different, but the group could discuss that. I know Maureen wants to speak just before you finish, so let me see if I could wrap the last two items up. And this again bleeds from what we just spoke about, developing basically a platform for action going forward from here. So we have a 5-year plan developed, documented, and sort of presented, perhaps at the IGF itself, maybe even broader than that. I'm looking for either another committee to deal with that or someone to lead this, to develop a research and action agenda for SIDS in the internet economy 2019 to 2024. Anybody is willing to take this forward. This is now not just the events or the funding and so on. This is the actual documentation of an action agenda, research and action agenda. Anybody willing to take that lead? Well, let's we didn't introduce yourselves, so let's get the mic to my colleague from Vanuatu.
Hi, I'm Jeff Garay. I represent the SIT of Vanuatu and also the chair to Vanuatu IGF. I saw the agenda and it does sound interesting. And while it is a big thing, but I volunteer myself for to take initiative for that, as I'm pretty much interested in research and development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
But I need a big team to work on that, as research is a very, very big thing.
All right, so we have Jeff volunteering.
I want to volunteer the Harvard student from here.
The Harvard School being volunteered from Egypt, yes.
It will help with the studies.
Dalcy is volunteering, so Dalcy. Saal volunteers. Wow, okay, so let's just give the names so that we'll yeah. We need to document it. Just pass the mic, someone, pass the mic to the front, just to get the names on the record, who else is volunteering. And I'm going to, so basically that's so before we adopt the action plan, I know Maureen would like to have a word, so I'm going to ask Maureen to speak shortly. Just get your names for the rapporteurs, just give the names. Mike.
Faye Samuel, Jamaica.
Faye Samuel, Jamaica.
Amelia from Fiji.
Amelia from Fiji. Anyone else volunteering for the research and action agenda?
Add my name, Mohammed Al-Khatib.
Mohammed Khatib.
El-Khatib.
El-Khatib from Egypt.
E-L-K-H-A-T-E-E-B.
All right, excellent.
And Jeffrey Garay from Vanuatu.
Jeffrey, spell his surname for the record. G-A-R-A-E. Jeffrey Garay from Vanuatu. Maureen, I know you'd like to say something. Go ahead, Maureen.
Very much, Tracy, and the team that's
We can't hear. Is get volume up or higher? Can you get the volume? We can't hear you so well.
Kanan is also volunteering.
Go ahead, Maureen, because we can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Soft. Volume up from remote.
Volume.
That's it. That's the maximum volume.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
We hear you now. Yes, Maureen. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the team that's gathered here today. It's been absolutely brilliant. I love the brainstorming session, and I certainly love the active volunteering that actually took place just now. It's really great to see. I really like the idea of, and we did sort of talk about it last year, but we didn't get the website set up. So if we could get some volunteers I think we have established a volunteer for that, but a website would be so valuable if we could set it up so that the content actually came from the communities, from the different regions. And I think that, uploading regular updates of what is actually happening in our regions, as Saal suggested, and so that we can actually sort of, if we've got our content, our objectives for what we're trying to achieve in each of the different regions, and it's out there, like we put it in the face of donors and sponsors who might want to support us. I really support the idea of having a SIDS IGF. So that we're actually talking about our own issues. We're talking about what's important to us and with regards to internet development. But and I think we should actually set that, definitely set that as a DC goal. But I also think it's important that in order to, we're all, we're coming from developing countries, and that we need to sort of like establish a SIG. We need to sort of like build capacity within our, within our sort of like region, so that when we actually have an IGF, we're actually getting people who are informed, who understand what the like issues that concern them. They can sort of like, they know what sort of like what they need to bring, the kind of information that they need to bring from their various communities into such a thing as our IGF. And also a SIG, because you're actually sort of like building capacity, it would actually help us to establish our youth groups, our women's groups, sort of like strengthen those, and also to sort of like look at how they can contribute towards a more successful translocation into the internet economy, which is what we actually want. And I really have appreciated this this session. It's probably, I have to say, it has been one of our best. We've only done two, but the fact that it's sort of like a real collaborative effort here, and it's been a brilliant opportunity for everybody to share what they're doing. And even though I'm sort of like sitting here in my little warm little spot in the Cook Islands, I have really appreciated sort of like sharing, being able to share with you in this session. And thank you, Tracy, for running it so well, and for everyone for contributing. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. Thanks for contributing. Really appreciate it, especially at that hour in the morning, Cook Islands. So we run out of time. Has anyone else on remote wanted to say anything? Just by the way, just make sure we get the remote people. All right. So I was reminded by my colleague Ria that we may not know everyone in the room. So I'm going to beg Abigail to help me by collecting email addresses and names from people. Do you happen to have anything that you could do it with quickly, like I guess your laptop or piece of paper or something? So if you can either scribble it for her or she'll grab it. I know many in the room, but I don't think I know everyone. So email addresses and names, so we don't lose track of what's happening here. I'm going to force add all of you to the SIDS, DC SIDS. So look out for that invitation, and please accept the invite when it comes. So bear that in mind. Saal?
Tracy, Amelia just suggested that you put up your email address and they email it to you.
That's an option as well, sure. Let's see if we can get it collected now, but my email address will be... Please don't spam me. Can I just get the screen back up on tech team? Just going to write it up here. So you can send it to Tracy.
Tracy?
It's the German keyboard, so it's a little challenging for me. I can't get the accent to work.
Can we please include everyone's role in their country as you write your name and information?
All right, so it's upside down. Right. So Tracy @, not because I can't seem to get the @ to work. Hackshow.org. Send it to that address. Easy enough. All right, but let's try and collect them if we can today as well. Appreciate that. All right, and with that, I'm going to adjourn the session. Thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate the I assume that the action plan has been adopted, so let's acclaim that and clap. Thank you so much.